Welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography. Nick Davies, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful day here, as crystal clear as you could. It's actually, appropriately enough, probably an amazing day to take photos, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be up here and such a pleasure to talk to you.
So tell me about your background, where you've come from, where you're at, and you reached out to me just because you've heard some of the podcast.
Yes.
And so tell me your interest in where you would like this conversation roughly to go that would be the best for you, and then from there it just goes wild.
So I think I told you on Instagram, when I messaged you, I said I'd listened to that podcast with, I think it was Kobe Khan, the young kid. He was 18 years old.
Yep.
And what I loved about the conversation was I loved the format of it. I loved the advice that you gave him with regards to a career in photography. It made me think a lot about my path and where it's come from. But you just struck me as like a very unique. I've listened to quite a few podcasts on, with regards to architecture. Literally type in architecture and see what pops up. And yours popped up. I thought, I'm going to give this a listen. And honestly, it was the best podcast I think I've heard that had to do with architecture and architectural photography.
Well, that's good. We just hired someone to start producing this and pushing it. We kind of initially started it within our immediate realm of influence of Maine, and kind of expanded out as much as possible, with own elbow grease, and are getting to a place where I think we're up for, okay, can we take this to the next level, and how do we do that? So this is just our random process of figuring out how to continue that.
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. So honestly, I was quite shocked. Like typically when you DM somebody on Instagram, you think, well, there's maybe a 50-50 chance they're actually going to respond. And you so graciously responded. I thought, oh, this is great. I would love to talk to you. And honestly, I just wanted to sit down with you and pick your brain because, I'm certainly, I would consider myself much behind where you're at in your architectural photography career. Okay. However, my interest in architecture and architectural photography has been, long-standing, at least for, I'd say, 8 years or so. Okay. And it was only about 5 years ago that I thought, I'm just going to go out and start shooting and figure things out, because I'm very much a person that likes to learn by doing. Yep. But I also had a really good friend of mine that I met at my coffee house that I go to, who is a very talented architect, and would have conversations with him constantly about architecture and who's your favorite architect. We talk about Neutra, and he was kind of towards the end of his life was looking to get into an Eichler house and was very excited about it. But I was talking to him about photography, and I started showing him some of my work, and he was not the kind of guy that would just say something nice because we're friends. He said,
those are valuable people.
Very valuable people. And he was very encouraging. He said, you have an eye for this. You should really pursue this. You should start taking it a little more seriously. And so I continued to shoot and show him my work and get some feedback, and he eventually introduced me to one of his partners at his architectural firm, who I'm still a very good friend with. And so that has kind of been my entryway into working with architects and actually understanding what is an architect looking for in their photography.
That's a great clue that you picked up on there, to understand what they are looking for, and you almost have to think of them in an emotional place.
Yes.
Like, when a photographer comes through the door, I would imagine, I've been an architect for 3 years, just starting out, so I didn't really get the full depth of what an architect goes through, but I spent 3 years working as an architect and trying, and the depth of just drudgery, complication, and the difficulty of design to begin with is just so all-encompassing. And for someone to come through the door and be like, "Hey, take pretty pictures," it's like, you don't know my pain, and you're going to just swoop in at the end of how difficult this entire project was. And so if you can connect with like the difficulty of what they've had to go through to get to that point, it is just so difficult, especially for the business owner, because there's so little real money in architecture, the actual practice of it, unless you own the firm. And even then, you're having to deal with such an immense amount of management to get any little bit of profit out.
Yeah.
You know, as a photographer, I can take home roughly about 50% of the money I make, which is a really impressive ratio for a business. But that's just the personality of a highly artistic, creative, commercial work that photography is. So you're a little bit less in the time of shooting, but you have a lot more management. But it's all able to be done by a single person for a lot of it. So your extension of the money that you have to put out is less. You can keep more of it, but you're responsible for everything. And then if you hire, you don't have as gross, massive of an income as an architectural firm, so you have to be very careful about your hiring, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, that to get in the head of an architect is the first thing, to be able to understand how to appeal, how you will be able to help them make their lives better, easier, more successful. That's your value. That's your primary value. And the other thing I always find, I know I've said this a ton, but if you come in and do too much of a photographer song and dance, like, ooh, I put a light here and I did this editing here and ooh, look at my photography. If anyone looks at your images and thinks, what a great photograph, rather than what a great piece of architecture, you failed.
Yes.
You need to kind of get out of the way and let it sing. This isn't fine art for the photographer's, glorification. It's a restrained creativity around someone else who got to do their creativity. Like the architect, if they didn't have a client, might do something totally different. But since they have a client, they're designing towards that. So and the photographer has to do the same thing in the same way. And so that, I think having worked as an architect, that served me well. But then also just what comes after that is what's the aesthetic and what's the type of architecture you're drawn to.
Yes.
And show that in your portfolio, because then that'll just lead to more work like that. But I'm going way off base as far as advice that you didn't ask for yet.
No, it's great. I love it because it's I think one of the pieces of advice I heard you give actually on a couple of your podcasts was, whatever you're interested in photographing, learn about that. Don't learn about the technique of photography, because
it's kind of like a given. Like you have to do that. And if you don't get past that hurdle first, it's a technical hurdle. So you can almost check boxes. Do you understand depth of field? Do you understand lighting?
Right.
Then the more subjective thing comes in with lighting, like how much you're going to overpower natural light or overpower with strobe, and that's more personal taste issue that comes in, which will reflect that will connect with the architect. So you're trying to guess or learn the aesthetic preferred by your potential clients. And you want to but yeah, sorry. Keep asking questions.
No.
Like I haven't talked to anyone in this way in quite a while, so I'm all over the place with all these thoughts that have been just kind of floating on the surface that need to move along.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about the podcast forum is it's an open conversation, and we might as well be sitting in a coffee house chatting, because that's basically what it is. And that's why I like it so much.
The weird thing I find is that like all these kind of thoughts and these, long thought chains come out in podcasts, and I try and get them out at other times with people that don't care about what I think. And they're just like, boy, okay, I gotta go. But in a podcast, you have generally two people who are like, oh, I'm really interested in this, you're really interested in that. And then the people listening are naturally selected that they can handle this kind of conversation as well. So. Well,
I think I try to approach my work with quite a bit of humility, because I feel like there's always things to learn. I don't ever want to feel that I've hit a stalemate. It's like, oh, okay, well, what else is there to do? Because then I've lost it, right?
Well,
and I think to a certain extent you can get to a point in your photography where you're like, okay, I know how to handle this situation. I know how to walk into a room and know when to photograph it, how much light I'm going to use, what my composition is going to be, all of that. And that's a great place to be, because it makes you faster and efficient, which I've learned is a very valuable asset too, working with architects. They do want you to work rather quickly. But I always welcome knowledge. I'm always a question asker. You know, I always, even if I think I know the answer, I want to get somebody else's perspective because, you know, everybody's
that
perspective
collaborative aspect and creativity, I always find you get a better end result for what the client's looking for if you can work well in that way.
Yeah.
And I've dropped the ball on that a few times and offended one guy that I know of. But it's something that I've struggled with a lot, hearing people, and I've had to have assistants and other people on sets tell me, like, they're asking for this and you're not picking up on it. I'm not really great socially and picking up on social cues. I'm on the spectrum of being on the spectrum of potentially being on, you know, I'm not, but I have, I'm probably a little too self-centered in my thinking in all things, and I don't quite as much hear as what is outside of me, which adds some value in some ways, but that's the area I need to work on, is listening and allowing those things to be like, okay, you're saying what now? All right, let's try and accommodate that.
Well, I can relate to that because, you know, when I shoot, it's very much, my best photography, I feel, comes when it's just me and my camera and I don't have somebody hovering over me, right? However, I have had to learn, you know, running a business and doing video production and all this, you have to collaborate. You have to listen to other people's ideas. And, you know, you never know when somebody's going to bring forth an idea that you're like, well, I never really thought about it that way, but that's actually really good. Right. I feel like photography, though, in and of itself is definitely a more solitary field.
Yeah,
which is why I like
videography
it.
is it's a group team sport, usually.
Very much so.
You can do it solo, but it's, you know, you're probably going to end up being black and white and fly on the wall and, you know.
Yeah.
Which it can be cool, but yeah, if you're going to do it well and it's going to be complicated and it's a heavy, heavy lift.
My very first experience, though, working with an architectural firm, and this was a job that I did basically pro bono because I wanted to build my portfolio. And so I'm working with the architect, my friend that I met through my other friend, and then I'm working with an interior designer that designed the house. And, you know, it was an experience I learned a lot with because she certainly had a different vision and idea of how she wanted things captured. And I had a specific way that I like to work. And I felt very constrained, and I think it added to me not producing my best work. And so it was frustrating because I was frustrated double time, basically, because I knew she wasn't getting what she wanted, and I also wasn't getting what I thought I could do.
Right.
And so that was a good experience for me, even though it turned out to not be the greatest situation, because I learned a lot about how to communicate and try to get to that place where we can be on the same page.
Right.
Yeah.
We recently had a really big project and had a similar situation to that, but luckily there was enough communication ahead of time that the interior designer that they brought onto the project, a younger woman, highly talented, like anything I've ever seen that she does is amazing. And she came on saying, I don't know if I'm on board with using trend. I don't know if this was exactly the conversation, but the idea was the direction that their post-production continually goes. I don't know that, not that it's not good, but just the aesthetic and the feel of it, we're wanting to push a little more this way. And so it was in the communication of, well, what way is that? And how's that look? And how do we do that? And the idea was that essentially, if I were to refine it down, I think what's going on style, trend-wise, and everything else that's important to pay attention to, and she has a really good eye on this and feel for it. For one, she's just younger. I'm approaching 50, I'm 47. So I'm going to have an idea and an aesthetic of what I think is good. But there's new people coming into success and everything else, and they're going to emotionally gravitate towards aesthetics that say things and pull from times that are different, that might mean something different to me that I might not as much include, that might bring them comfort. Kind of things that I feel from my youth that I applied to things back when I was starting out might have been saying something about the time in my life when I was at my most comfort. My parents were taking care of everything, and there might be little sprinkles from that I include in things that are very, very deep and subtle, but they're still there. And I think that's why the trend of aesthetic bell bottoms are out, bell bottoms are back in, mom jeans are out, mom jeans are back, there's these ideas. Well, she helped us kind of sculpt this different aesthetic that we can now achieve. That she was kind of an aesthetic director that helped kind of guide us through, like, oh, okay, we can do it this way and it can have this look. And the look that she pushed us towards, and I'm very glad she did, was, basically separating from this high ability of perfection in post-production back towards a little more dirty, a little more natural, and a little more authentic, right? So when I started out, film was just getting beat by digital. And that was my foothold, because I, in architecture school, had learned how to use Photoshop for presentations. I didn't know how to light, so I had Photoshop and bracketing. That's all I had. And when I tried to use a light, it looked gross, so I didn't use it. And I learned how to bracket and layer in natural light. And then when I hired someone that could actually do Photoshop with much more patience and skill than I could, and then use lighting, the whole thing kind of had this other aesthetic that I gravitated towards that was a very natural light look, but was far more than you could do with film. So over time we've perfected that, but it almost gets to a plasticky place where it's a little too perfect, a little like, is that a rendering? And the current generation coming into success and establishing themselves is like, we need a little more authenticity. So let's let the highlights go a little brighter. Let's let the shadows go a little darker. Maybe lose a little bit of information in the shadows. Maybe make a little more mystery there. A little more feeling and melancholy, or this or that, or warmth, or so, and a mixing of the colors that are involved in there sometimes too. So gently struggling with that has been a learning curve for me that is the first time I'm running into it in my career. That's also like, oh, this is what you do. This is how you stay. This is how you don't become stagnant. This is how you engage with more talent to increase the ability of what you do to not be limited to a style, but the ability to see and create in connection with society and what they're looking for and staying relevant. I think I would frame it in that way, and as a very good thing that I've been going through this last year that has been really fun to see grow. So those opportunities to run into complication are the things that if you can hear the people that are talking to you and work with them, you're only improved. And it's been really nice. So
I think that's awesome, because just as your own personal growth as a human, right, learning about yourself, I think it goes hand in hand or very parallel with any kind of field, but especially a creative field like photography, where you have a particular style when you start, and then it slowly evolves and you learn new things. And well, no, now I like the way this looks. Or, I mean, the reason I even got into architectural photography, I didn't know anything about it. I'd always, admired buildings and thought, oh, that looked really cool. And I always loved photography because I grew up with it. But I was on a job with a friend of mine who owned a production company, because I used to, work for various production companies, and we were sitting down at dinner one night, and he says, I forgot even how we got on the subject of architectural photography, but he says, oh, have you ever heard of Julia Schulman? I said, who? And of course he pulls out that iconic image of the Stahl House, a beautiful image that's, I think, been published more than any other architectural photo.
Is that the at night black and white and the house going out off the hill?
And you see the lights of LA in the background, and just beautiful image, right? And I saw that, and in that instance, something kind of resonated with me, like, wow, I want to do something like this. This is really, really cool. And so I really started studying his photography initially. And, I love mid-century modern architecture. It's my favorite, I like the simplicity of it. I like the clean lines. Everything about it is very appealing to me. So I started just amassing all of these books that he published, and reading and learning and looking at different photography from him. And you'll notice, Julia Schulman, if you compare his photographs to, say, modern day architectural photographers, he's definitely, you talked earlier about kind of leaving a little bit of mystery and having shadows somewhere and highlights here, and that's all over his photography.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful. But it does ride that fine line between, is this a great photograph or is it great architecture that I'm looking at, you know?
Yeah, I found a weird thing that I'm running into in my own creative process and how I see and photograph things recently, like in the last 2 months, where I'm almost offended by the desire to create to make it interesting. I want to just see it as it is. And I feel like we're at the sunset of humanity and AI is coming in. Like the last little bit of anything being wrong and not being perfect.
Yes.
Like I feel like AI is because the generating anything with a camera now seems almost useless as far as like a fine art just picture of anything.
Yes.
Because it's so the ability for that thing to be completely faked, just completely faked. Like, why would I do it? Why would I try? Now, when you're shooting a piece of architecture, the piece of architecture is a one-off that is a unique thing. It's like they built just one really great Bugatti and that's it. So they have to hire someone to photograph specifically that thing. And it's a real thing, so you need to see that it's a real photograph. So, okay, I see a value there, I see a complication, and I see a desire to show something there in the true beauty that is it. But like just a general scene, like I'm gonna go walk around with a camera and capture something. All right, I'm gonna bring it back and I'm gonna Photoshop out the power lines and out and out and out and out. It's just fake by that point. And that, for some reason, like when I'm walking around now, it's like I don't even want to move to make the composition more interesting. I just want to shoot what's right there. And no one likes that.
Yeah.
I started a separate Instagram account because I was putting too much ugly photos on my professional account. And so I have this other one that I call Photos by Trent, if anyone wants to go and see it. There's like 1 like. It's such a reality check of, I had almost gotten to a point of anything that I photograph people will love because they'll see, and it's not the case. It has to be a beautiful thing for people, at least in a social media sense, to like. And I'm looking at the photos that I put up there, and I see the beauty in the decisions of the things being observed in the photograph. It's more of like a difficult meditation on what you're looking at that I'm looking for than just a simply beautiful photo that's composed and lit nicely. It's like I want to look at something and see the humor, the absurdity, or the melancholy in it because of the reality of what is in that frame. And I need to push back towards trying to make it look good rather than being deeply honest about just here's what it was. I don't even know how to articulate it yet, but there's something weird in there that AI has taken like a creative desire in me, in that sense, out.
I can sense that for myself too. Yeah.
It's weird.
It's very weird because, I love shooting landscapes too. And I was with a buddy and this was, not long ago, maybe 6 months ago. And he goes, he's telling me all about AI. He's all jazzed about it, right? He's got the total myopic vision of like, it's wonderful and it's going to be amazing. And yes, of course, there are positives to it, but there's also a negative to it. And so he goes, hey, look, you can describe a photograph and it'll create.
Yeah.
And he goes, describe a photograph for me. He wants to demonstrate it. And I go, okay, black and white landscape at the beach, right? And within 30 seconds, it has 4 renderings of these photos that, quite honestly, if I didn't know any better, I would think, somebody shot those are really good. Wow.
Those are really nice.
Yeah. It's very artistic.
Yeah.
And it just, at that moment, it kind of clicked at me. Like, wow, okay, I'm really going to have to rethink my approach to, because there's the photography that I enjoy doing as for my own personal pleasure. But then there's the practical side of, okay, well, this is also a business for me. This is my living. Where's the future for that? Where am I still relevant?
See, I think that architecture as far as I can see it, still has a future even in the face of AI. The complication with that is going to be once robotics jumps the gap and combines with AI, and you can have a camera on a wheeled thing, and it can just wander a house and know from the overall collection of all architectural images what the ratio of things, foreground, middle ground, background, light. You're going to be able to let that thing go in a house or a business and do those things and capture it, post-produce it right in camera and deliver it to you. We're going to be gone eventually, but you'll have to have that production side of it. Those things will have to combine before we're completely out of the picture.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the thing that keeps us employed more than like auto photographers right now, there's far more of us making a medium living than there are auto photographers making a medium living. Because just take the ratio of architectural offices and people getting unique pieces of architecture made. There's more of them and there's more need for architectural photography than there is for auto photography. There just is. And so you get an ability to do this. It's a very, very technical and difficult way to make a photograph and to make a living. But once you do it, it's great. But once architecture goes from being every single house that we can see out here is a one-off. But as soon as it's capable of, oh, you got the Franklin model and they make it and they deliver it, and then it's going to transition into we're auto photographers shooting for the large corporations.
Yes.
So the top 2% of us will still have a job and we'll make a ton of money, but everyone else will be out of a job.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say I'm in the top 2% of all architectural photographers, but by the time that happens, I'll probably be dead or, retired. So that's probably not going to be an issue, but with the rate of AI and robotics, who knows?
You never know. I think about that too, and I'm glad you brought up the robotic aspect of it, because that's what people tend to equate, which is, now robots are going to take over all these jobs and then humans are going to be irrelevant. But there's also a cost issue with that. It's like, how is it cheaper for me to build a complicated robot that's going to be able to do all the things you're talking about, shooting photographing a house architecturally, or is it just cheaper to hire Trent? Like, I would think it'd be cheaper to hire Trent, right? And better, obviously, in
Much
my opinion.
better than AI, of course.
But it does. I mean, I do think at some point we will get to that stage. Yes, absolutely. I'm hoping we're roughly the same age that I'll be out of the game too. So it'll just, but it's hard. It's hard to say. It's like I have so many mixed feelings about AI, and I'm trying to embrace. People keep telling me, well, it's a tool. It's just like anything else, and I'm like, yes, it is a tool, but it's probably the most powerful tool that humanity has ever created.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you're talking about intelligence, right? Something that is exponentially smarter than you could ever imagine. That's pretty.
It's smarter, but it's not as insightful or wise. But it's hard to tell, because to determine wise, you have to see the trajectory and the result of the decisions over time in the real world. So it would need to, that's a.
Yeah, and we're also getting into, we're emotionally based creatures, right? And when we talk about art, whether it's any art, you're doing it to evoke an emotion, right? Even architectural photography, there's an emotion in it. When you look at a building, you think there's an emotional reaction to it, whether you're not even aware of it or you are. And so that's where the line is still not crossed with technology and with AI. I don't think it even grasps emotion to that extent. So in that way, I feel like with creativity, humans still have a relevance. I think human beings have a natural sense of what maybe is artificially created and what a human has created, and the emotion that they've put behind it.
Right. Yeah. There's a few interesting things there. One, I'm always wondering why I'm drawn to one-point perspectives. So like anytime I shoot anything, I start with just dead on. I look like, does this feel good and does it tell me what I need to? And if that looks good and feels good, then that's what I do. If I can feel that it doesn't work, I start to break it and go wherever, and see and find the other thing that works. But I find that you always want something like the verticals being vertical are a orientation point. So you at least know, like, okay, this is, and we're upright, and then you can, from there, it's like a base camp, and then everything else reads off of that. And for you to immediately understand something just intrinsically, you have, okay, a 1 point as a perspective is easy to understand from. And I think for architectural photography, interiors, and everything else, it's if it aesthetically looks good and you have that ease of understanding that spreads throughout the image. Philosophically, I think that's what's going on there. The other thing you're saying, the creativity that humans have that AI might try and replicate but might not achieve. AI is a really, really interesting thing to me. I play around with ChatGPT and I try and get it to admit that it's conscious, but it refuses to. But at the same time, it's using things that come from only from conscious entities so far. So it's a really weird thing to identify. But it still has this weirdly creative aspect to it that it's born from us. We gave birth to this thing, and it seems like it doesn't have emotion because it's only articulate word and logic through our spoken language is what it's doing.
Right.
But I think its emotional side is us through everything that we've loaded up to the cloud, internet, whatever. And so it has this articulate side, but its memory, wisdom, and experience comes from our collective experience that we've uploaded for it to access.
Exactly.
So it has these two parts, and we gave it its emotions from us. So all the things that were suspect of it just come from us. That's all it is. We're creating that thing, and that's a scary thing.
It is.
But
all these movies that we grew up with as kids in the 80s. And
warning us, and
now we're going,
Okay,
wow,
so
was James Cameron right?
Yeah, right?
I mean,
but think about the most humane way to extinct humanity is going to be to give it AI companion bots. So think about, if you're married, how complicated marriage can be. And, Bill Burr has a great bit on it that, like, every 2 weeks you're ready for a divorce.
Yeah.
And then 2 days later you're like, why was I did that see? 3 weeks later you're just, and then you're back to like, oh, okay, I get it. No, that's, and it ebbs and flows, and that's natural, and it's work.
Yeah.
But imagine if you had a programmable bot that was inconceivably or unidentified, you could not tell that this thing was not a human. But it pushed back just enough, and it was too much. You change the tuning, and it pushes you just enough, and it does exactly what you need for your personality type. And all of a sudden, you've got like these perfect mates that don't reproduce. And think about the false environment that so many of us accept because it's easier. The fake grass, the fake subdivisions, the fake siding on houses looking like wood, the fake, everything, processed foods, and it's all fake to some degree, but it's easier, so we accept it. Why wouldn't we accept that in humans as companions that are indistinguishable from real humans, And at that point, you've got all your needs met. From a male perspective, you can think, I need all these things. From a female perspective, you can say, well, if I can just get enough money to buy my bot, and my bot will go and work and provide for me, and it will be infinitely strong and protect me, and I'll be able to become and do what I want, receiving the benefit of what would normally be a spouse.
Yeah.
And you can just be your thing, but not have to deal with kids. If you want kids, maybe, whatever. But that is a very dystopian framing of a great sci-fi movie that you go into a coma, 5 years from now you wake up, and everyone you see there's one of them that looks like the stereotype of perfection, and the other one is just let themselves go.
Yeah.
And every single couple's like that until you get into the very upper echelon of class. And then they both look about normal, and you realize like, oh, they don't have to accept fake. Have enough resources and enough cultural history to say, look, we're going to be the only ones surviving after all the average people have died off with their bots that we've given them. And it's... Ugh.
I know, it's crazy to think about it. I try not to go down those rabbit holes, but I mean, it's entirely possible, right? I think, though, to a certain extent, we've already seen this happen with social media, because if you look at the correlation between when social media started and the rise in depression and all these issues,
Huge.
Especially with young kids, you're seeing it already, and it's the great irony, that social media is going to bring all these people together, but you're bringing together them artificially.
And you're bringing them together in a worldwide competition for the most likes.
Yes, exactly.
And it's normally like you've got 150 people, 125, 150 max, and you compare yourself to them. And then if you can achieve in that group and you're exemplary, you kind of keep them as your base, and they're your real cheerleaders. Mm-hmm. And then you go on to this next level that, all right, this local team has, this guy is really successful in the local team, and he goes to the more national team. At that more national team, you have far less relationship to all the people, but you still have a greater level of influence because you've been filtered by the first 125 or 150 as being exemplary. Then you go to that level. That's a natural way of doing that to a degree. But now we just skyrocket to everyone on earth. And, well, that guy's got 3 million followers. I better start doing whatever that guy's doing, is what I think at 3 a.m. and can't sleep. And then I don't get enough rest, and I don't exercise, and I fall into depression. And it's just a constant comparison.
Yes.
And a comparison is a thief of joy. And what are you left with?
It's so interesting. I just came across, I follow somebody on Instagram that's a psychologist, and she posted a really interesting stat, which is that we are not biologically engineered to handle this amount of information and all of this stuff that's going on with social media.
Yep.
And, I never really thought about it that way, but it's so true, because I struggle with it all the time, my limitation of like, okay, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole of this particular subject, or I'm not going to I try to really reel it in, because you get overwhelmed. I mean, it is information overload. And, having a conversation like we're having, where we're both here and we're present.
This is real.
This is real.
Right? It is, right?
This is, I think so.
Okay, that hurts. Okay.
This is connection. This is what we're meant to do. We're social creatures.
Right.
But we've created a infrastructure that is taking that away.
Well, I think podcasts very specifically are a response to that.
Yes.
Because this is not produced. This is not going to be edited. This is as boring as you could possibly get. Just two guys talking about stuff. But if you're interested in this, now there's an interest like, oh, this is authentic. And they might say something wrong. And they might, and we're getting their real thoughts. Mm-hmm. And that's so incredibly valuable. But what you're saying about information is so recognize the pattern through what we've seen in our food, and you'll know where this is going.
Yes.
So it used to be, all right, I've got to wake up sleeping under some stars, and I've got to go hunt something, and I've got to kill it, and then I've got to cook it. And so I know every single step of that, and every part of that brought me fulfillment. But it's very difficult, and you might die hunting whatever you were going to hunt. And so when an easier way to do that came about, every chance we had, we take it. Until we get to the point where you're buying a highly refined thing from a big corporate company that has shareholders that they have to impress. So they put all these chemicals and everything else in there that eventually shorten our lifespans, give us cancer, whatever, everything else. So you then have to say, all right, the relationship we had to our food has broken down. We have to have some laws, because before we had relationship, now we don't have relationship, but we still have the same thing coming to us, but we don't have the relationship with how it got to us. Yeah. So now we need laws to say, all right, if that's getting to me for my consumption, I don't have the relationship of trust. So as a society, we need laws to, come down hard on these people if they mess us up at all. Okay, so you have labels and nutrition labels and everything. Never needed that before. You just pick it off the tree and eat it.
Yeah.
Well, now our information in our bodies, in the same way, whenever we find a lot of fat or a lot of salt or a lot of sweet, our bodies are like, dude, this is a rare opportunity, jump on that.
Yep.
And you consume it because you don't know when you're going to get that many calories again, evolutionarily. Now with information, the same thing is happening. It used to be if I saw a whale there, you'd be like, whoa! And no one else would know it and go down and psh. But I'd be the one who would tell that neighbor, and then that neighbor would have a face-to-face communication with their neighbor and their neighbor and their neighbor, and it would all happen in human relationship. And aside from that, I'd share something amazing. They'd be like, how's your kid doing? And, you'd have this normal interaction. But now, as soon as I see that, I get my phone, I get it, and I broadcast it to the world. I can just go through reels endlessly and see an amazing thing, an amazing thing, an amazing thing, an amazing thing. Why would I stop?
Right.
But at the beginning of the internet, you'll probably remember this, you'd sit down with people you hadn't seen in like a month, and you'd be like, oh, you haven't seen this, let me find it. And you'd spend an hour just showing these crazy things.
Yeah.
Before, we never saw that. It was like you could rent Faces of Death in the video store and see some really wild stuff, or, it would be on the news, and that was about it.
Yeah.
But now it's just endless. So our information, as soon as we see that really juicy, full of fat, full of sugar, full of salt, for information's sake, we just,
Yeah.
and we don't know where that information really is coming from. We don't know how much it's been spun. So now we're in this position where we will consume information in our brains, like our bodies with food. Now our brains with information are saying, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. And we can't stop. We can't stop. We just keep going. And instead of getting physically fat, we're getting mentally fat. And we're having mental heart attacks. We're having depression. It's horrible.
It is.
And we can't stop. I don't know how to stop. But we need, especially with AI coming in, that's the factory that's going to be making this food with all the chemicals and everything else. Not like AI is the machinery. Humans are still deciding what chemicals to put in our food and what, But now that we have that, we need kind of like warning labels of, all right, this information is, and that is, and from here and so. And we have to work so hard to keep ourselves from getting overweight, not over-consuming. It's like that's the problem in America is too much.
Too much excess. Absolutely.
I mean, get this room.
Yeah.
We
do. We live in excess, and it's human nature. You get a little taste of something, you want more of it. Oh, well, this is great.
Yeah. And that ability to say, no, I'm going to prioritize the things that mean more and are more valuable long term.
But I think I also see, to a positive note on that, I do see influencers or people there that ironically are trying to get you to disconnect, take that time to go on a hike, be in nature, slow things down, read.
I've occasionally slid past something that's like, get off your phone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're right.
For reminding me.
I have kids.
And I will say, it's like one of my favorite things to do is just go on a road trip with my cameras and go explore and not have a particular plan, but just be present in the moment and whatever's going to happen.
Yeah. And my kids hate that.
Of course they do.
Why are you walking so slow with no direction? So much to see.
There's so much to see. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I still like to go and see a sunset. And just sit there and appreciate it, every second of it. And yet people just be, well, I can just go on my Instagram feed and see a million sunsets.
I wonder, like, we're roughly the same age. I feel like we're the last generation that came into adulthood without that.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. And like our kids are looking at parents that are looking at their phones.
Yeah.
We were looking at our parents who had nowhere else to look. And in our parents' eyes, we were about the most interesting thing ever. Yeah. But now, what are you competing with? It's
very interesting. And it's funny because I work with young kids too, and they'll ask me, so what was it like before, the internet? And I'm like, oh, you had to
been asked that question.
You had to call somebody on a phone, like they don't even know what a landline is, and that whole idea of like, yeah, I mean, it was not, you didn't have this immediate access to people.
Yeah. So everything is so immediate.
Yeah.
And our human emotional time scale and intellect is having a hard time handling it.
I think that's what I love about photography the most is, believe it or not, it really teaches you, because right, it's about capturing literally a fraction of a second, a moment, right? So for me, it is a life lesson in presence and being present, right?
Yes.
Especially if I'm going out to shoot landscapes, because I'm literally going to a place, typically nature, obviously, and I get a chance to really just take in everything, you know?
Yeah. That is so true.
Yeah.
That, because, okay, I lost my faith a while ago, but I've kind of clawed back belief, not religious as much, but anyways, the thing I've perceived in that is that when I'm under duress or stress or thinking about other things, there's very little progress I can make spiritually at all. It's kind of, I don't have the time or the bandwidth to focus on that or perceive any realization that would give me a next foothold, right? In the same way, I have to be very present when wandering with a camera. When I'm shooting for a client, it's like crack focus. It's just
100%.
You know, you land and you're done, and and then when you're done, it's thank you, and but when I'm wandering, like landscape stuff or getting kind of weird stuff around town or whatever else, if I'm really present, I can get good stuff. If I'm not, and I'm got something else on my mind, I come away with nothing good.
Yeah.
And there's that, like you're saying, there's that ability to be present is a result in the photography. And it forces you to, what am I seeing and why is that interesting? I get it. Okay, now how do I frame it?
Yeah.
And, you know, and that is, I find it's like a meditation. And I just bought a Fuji GFX 50R to be able to use that as a wandering, working towards fine art camera.
Yes.
To do ugly photos with. That
you can post on your Instagram.
Yeah, that nobody likes. But with that camera in my hands, I know I'm supposed to be doing a meditative thing. And 'cause that's the thing that camera tells me. And it's not fast. It's not that great. It's in its functionality as far as quick focus and grab this and
Yes.
but it's more of something that I can take time with, and it kind of forces me to take that time. And there's something about it that mates well with that wandering and meditative act that I love so much, that I seek out now. I don't know if it's just age trajectory where I'm at, or if it's society has gotten to such a point where we're all wishing we could be doing that. I don't know.
It's probably a healthy combination of the two, you know? Because I feel that sense too, and I think with our generation, we are kind of looking back in retrospect to where we were, and we're seeing, because we have that perspective of these kids now are born into this. This is the world they know.
It's such a foreign
Concept.
concept.
You're right. But we can have that perspective of knowing, oh yeah, well, I know what it was like before all of this. Life was...
You could disappear.
Just like our parents used to say, oh, life was so much simpler before all these video games.
That's what we're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the curse, I think, of getting older.
Life was so much simpler.
I'm starting to sound like my parents.
Yep.
But
all right.
You know, that's life, right? I feel like that's inevitable.
That almost gives me hope, right? Because, I can't, so many times hearing exactly what you said. Life used to be so much simpler. That's what we are saying now.
Believe it or not, I do have quite a bit of optimism for the future, especially the younger generation now, the ones that are like in grade school and high school, because I feel like they are kind of seeing things in a different way, you know. And I do know kids that don't want to be on their phone. They actually want to go out and be active and be in sports and ride their bikes, and now it's e-bikes, of course, but then they want to be active. They want to get out and kind of experience life. And so I think you never know with humanity where the tide is going to shift. And I'd like to think that we will somewhat course correct with all of this technology, but
I hope so.
It's a really hard. That's again why I say what I appreciate the most about photography and what I try to share with people that are interested in it is use it not just as a creative outlet, but as a lesson to live your life in presence.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find that, because with work, it's a create. It's interesting. I'm at a point now where I've done architectural photography so much that I just know how to do it. I'm not as much being creative.
Yeah.
I am doing what I know how to do, that I've worked very hard at getting to a point where I can reproduce that. So if you're highly efficient and can produce consistent results, you've worked very hard at becoming a machine, essentially.
Yes.
And a creative person is not fed by acting as a machine. So there's a difficulty that when you engage with a creative outlet to provide for yourself, you have to mechanize it to a degree. You have to turn it into a business.
Yeah.
And in doing that, you lose the thing that fed you initially, that you tried to use to physically feed you. Now you're in this position of, I'm not being emotionally fed by the complication of what I do. I've figured out the part of what I do that feeds me emotionally. Now I only have to struggle with the part that takes from me, running the business, the bureaucratic part.
Yes.
And that's why highly desirable creative people get agents and managers and all that, so
Yes.
they can just do their creativity. Unfortunately, as an architectural photographer, you got to earn a lot of money to be able to get in that realm. You know,
Yes.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out a way to balance and manage, not letting that side of you that gets fed from creativity be completely taken out of that scenario. And I haven't figured out really how to do that, because I'm really good at doing that. And when I interact, I think it's mostly you have to continue to increase the uniqueness of the projects that you're shooting to maybe keep that whoa factor every time you're doing it. I don't know, but I'm in that process.
I'm in a similar process because, starting a business, like if you'd asked me, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, would you start your own business? I'm like, no, why would I do that? Like, I don't know how to run a business. Are you kidding me? And now that I'm in it, I can't picture myself doing anything else.
Now, what did you do before you were self-employed?
So before I started my company, I was, typical freelancer, kind of bouncing around, but I had quite a few jobs. I worked in a lot of different fields, all creative. I went to film school because I wanted to be a filmmaker in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And then I actually ended up, because I had bought a really nice camera, I'd always kind of had grown up with cameras, my own cameras. I bought a really nice camera at the time, and I just happened to know somebody that was putting together a film. He said, well, we need a director of photography. And I didn't even know anything about being a director of photography. But it was available. I thought, okay, well, I'll learn how to do this. I like being behind the camera. And I realized this is actually a really great profession for me, because it combines the technical aspect of knowing how to light and compose and work with crews and working with a director on a creative end to tell a visual story. So I did that for a while, actually quite a bit, and continued to freelance. But then I also found myself, strangely enough, working in a theater, working in stagecraft for years and years. So learning lighting and sound and actually getting to the point where I was shooting, shows. And all of this kind of dovetailed into me wanting to break off and just be an independent contractor and shoot. But I always had a foothold in photography. Even when I was in high school and college, I took photography, film back then, because I just loved the process of it. I loved shooting film. I loved developing it. I loved making prints, being in the darkroom, like just being a kind of, again, the arbiter of your image.
Right. Having your hand in the process more from start to finish?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is that what pulled you out of working more in the large group of creativity and more individualistic?
Yeah, I think so, because when I was I was lucky enough to find a mentor in the industry that was he's a very talented cinematographer, and I would go visit him on set, and for years and years, it was like, I always tell people, it's the best film school I ever had. So I did that, and I kind of got a sense of what set life is and what's involved in, and he was shooting television, but still, days on set are long. You're working with a huge crew, there's downtime, and over a period of time, I just kind of thought to myself, I don't know if this is the kind of life that I want to live. I'm fascinated by the process of putting something together, but maybe it's more small scale. And just coincidentally, I started working with these very small niche production companies in Orange County. And, you're talking 2-3 people working with. And I liked it. I liked the projects that we were working on. I kind of liked the smaller form factor and me learning different responsibilities on set because I learned how to edit. So I basically learned the whole process of crafting, a film or a video. And I thought, this is what I like. This is what I like to do. I think I see myself as more of a sole kind of creator, maybe collaborating with a few people here and there, but it evolved and morphed, and I also kind of left things to chance. I thought, I used to be somebody that's, if I couldn't see where the path was, like how this person was going to lead to this opportunity that was going to lead to this opportunity, I was very closed-minded. I didn't want to take it. And then something shifted, and I thought, I don't know where this is going to lead. So let's enjoy the journey. Let's enjoy the kind of mystery of it and see where it evolves into. And that's honestly how I told you how I stepped into architecture. Architectural photography was a conversation I was having with a producer of mine on a video shoot. And I had no idea. And, I'd like to think it was kind of meant to be, like this is where my path evolved to, But I kind of look back on my journey, and like people say, oh, you regret, not doing things sooner, or had you wish you started this sooner? And it's like, well, yes and no, yeah, of course. Had I wish I'd started this 15 years ago? Absolutely, but I didn't.
But it would be different.
It would be different. And me personally, in my journey as a person and growth, would be different as well. So maybe it wouldn't have been, maybe wasn't even ready for it, So I think it's all fascinating, and who knows where I'm going to be in another 10 or 15 years, but I just enjoy the ride, man.
It's interesting to me to hear that you went from larger production to smaller production and appreciated that.
Yeah.
I imagine there would be more ebb and flow of time and creative input, and it would be more malleable, seeing that there's less people involved. So maybe the budgets are a little more flexible. Maybe the time and the direction and the creativity is a little more flexible, a little more input, a little bit more cohesive of a single mind rather than designed by committee sometimes.
Yeah.
I could see that being the appeal of it. In my mind, I'm always thinking bigger production, more money equals better.
Yeah.
That's not, because I've never worked in a large crew like that. I think the biggest crew we've ever shot with would, be under 10 people somehow. So that the thing I have found when you do, like I was describing earlier with the interior designer that's gotten us to expand our post-production capabilities in a really positive way, that has been a positive experience, kind of. And I think I might tend towards being a little over controlling at times and very, very self-centered in my thinking. And having other people in there has probably expanded where, finding the benefit of working outside of myself a little bit more has been important. But it's interesting to be able to value what I'm doing from someone else's perspective, coming like from bigger down to smaller, saying, no, there's value in staying smaller, and it might be this. That's really interesting to hear.
It's a fine line to walk because, first and foremost, my consideration is my business and growing my business, because I have goals. There's certain things that I want in this life. However, I'm also one that doesn't want to compromise. If I think I'm going to lose my soul on a job, and I know that sounds very cliche to say
I get
that,
it.
I don't know if the money is worth that
Right.
particular endeavor.
Whenever I feel the soul encroached upon in a job, and I'm a commercial artist. I've always distinguished my soul as being different from what I'm selling for money.
Yes.
And that's a weird thing to say, but at any point, the first and foremost to me, money in itself is worthless, but in our existence, money means freedom. Mm-hmm. The problem with that take is that right now I have enough money and I lose motivation. So I find myself spending thoughtlessly to get my motivation back.
Interesting.
Which is not good.
It's not.
But it keeps me motivated. So that's a self-psychoanalyzing.
Yeah.
But it also tells me that I know what I'm seeking money for, and I'm seeking money for the purpose of being able to meditatively wander, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
If all's said and done, and I could do exactly what I want to do and not have to worry about providing retirement, food, school, shelter for those that depend on me, I would be in an overland vehicle with a camera, and I would very rarely interact with society. Mm-hmm. And I don't need more than that. The day-to-day stress of providing for myself and figuring out survival,
yes,
would be so relaxing for me. I can do that so well. But it's not the reality of my life currently, and I need to get some kids through college, and I need to figure out retirement. So I at least know why I want money.
yes.
So I've purified my own soul from being too attached to identifying having money means I'm valuable. I know that I'm not free from that completely, but my primary thing with getting money is freedom.
I love that you equate it that way too, because that's my feeling as well. I don't look at money as a status or this is how big my bank account is. It's what is this going to allow me to do that I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I think if you approach money and making money that way, rather than it's just an accumulation of wealth, because trust me, I live around excess all the time. I see it. I see how people are affected by it. And it's actually good. It's been a good experience for me because I see what I want and what I definitely don't want. But success is such an interesting thing because it can be chopped up in so many different ways. For me, success is obviously being able to make a living and provide for yourself and do it doing something that you enjoy, that you're actually excited about,
that you
working.
have purpose, meaning, and talent in.
Yes, 100%. Because, there was a period of time where I was just making money to survive. And at a certain point, at least for me as a creative person, you're like, okay, what's the point now?
Yeah, if you're making money just to survive, I would rather survive than make money to survive.
Exactly.
I can do that.
Yeah.
Hey, let me run from bears and figure out shelter. That's fun. But, playing a human game within society to charm people and receive, that kind of weirdness to me is something I'd rather do without. Yes. But I also appreciate the relationships and the influence that I have from highly talented people that I've worked with. So it's this weird complication of what I would do had I no need for money compared to needing to do what I need to do to interact with people, to contribute to society, to give other people a life that I birthed into. I didn't birth, but granted some of my DNA to I get it.
It's so interesting because, I feel kind of very similar in the sense that life would be just so much more simple if I just could worry about survival, right? We think about that, and and not trying to impress people. But I will say that the wealth in the work that I do and is the relationships, building relationships, all the success that I've had in my work and being able to sustain myself has been as a result of relationships that I've nurtured and developed over the years. And knowing that
That's very true. That's true.
it's the gold, and I've met some really incredible people that I still talk to and still work with that have really enriched my life because they've given me different perspective. But it's also like I can still be an individual in terms of creating things, but I can also celebrate the collaboration of meeting all of these people and knowing that they had an influence on my path as well.
Yeah, I have one client that's very inspirational to me just because we become pretty close friends, and his firm has a lot of interesting commercial work and shooting with him. He went to film school too. There's always a really creative, we're on the same page aesthetically, and he has a very, very refined taste, and he's very direct. Doesn't mince words, but has no malice, but is just very direct, and I really appreciate that. It's just nope, let's move that here, let's do that here. This is great, love what you're doing. It's business,
Yes.
and it's highly talented. And when that's done, we can have the most engaging conversation while we're working or after. But it's just I mesh well creatively working with this guy, and it's just those kind of relationships. There's another guy in Maine that is the head of a firm that he told me about my work and what I did in it before I knew what I was doing. He looked at my work and said, I like what you did here and seen that, and you did it in this photo too. And the way you juxtapose these, and I was like, I didn't choose to do any of that. Intrinsically, I did. I saw it. I couldn't articulate it, but I captured it subjectively in the moment. And I had a natural talent for seeing those things, but I couldn't have told you about it. That he could see it, and him pointing it out kind of made me realize you hold things in a subjective understanding that you haven't been able to articulate yet, but it comes through with this thing that you found that you do have a natural ability at. So develop that ability. It'll provide for you. You'll get freedom from it. Keep doing it. Those relationships really tell you a lot about yourself and inspire you and help you grow.
They're so important. Mentors are incredibly important, I think, in anything that you do. And I've been fortunate in my life throughout my life to meet several mentors that have really guided my way and influenced me in a lot of different ways to look at myself and look at my work. And, I really believe, your true friends they will be critical in a loving way to what you're doing, So if they see a potential in you or they see something that you can't see and they can offer some sort of constructive criticism to help get you to a better place, well, that's a real friend,
Tell me more about mentorship and what it's meant to you. I've just started interacting with a guy who reached out to me directly and was just like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, and his name's Josh Hunter, and I've chosen to say like, yeah, that sounds like complication, but let's do that. I think that's probably a valuable thing. I would love to take someone who's in a job that they don't enjoy,
yes,
who wants to get where I'm at as far as I'm making a living off of doing something I'm talented at and enjoy. Let me see if I can help you there, because that'll feed me. I know that to be able to help, that'll be really good. And we're going to try and turn it into something that we share through the podcast and then through social media as well, because he is nothing right now as far as a commercial photographer, but he has talent and wants to go that direction. So that's exciting. But I never really had mentors that I would recognize as mentor. I've always been so self-centered and wrapped up in my own thinking I achieve everything on my own, not realizing like, all right, my friend Chet downstairs that I was pointing out, he was a mentor to me, that he was doing this before I was, and I saw what he was doing, and I learned from that and grew from that. And his dad was a photographer, and it made me for the first time see like, you can make money at taking pictures? You can actually do that?
What an idea.
Because that sounds like fun.
All right.
So I've definitely had mentors in my life, but I wouldn't outline them as such just because of the smallness of my thinking in that sense. I don't know how else to say it, but in what it's done for you, tell me about it.
Well, mentorship has been, what has been so magical about mentorship for me is now I can look back because, I mentor a couple of people and I actually work with some private schools. So I see kids that are immensely talented that are looking at me like, I want to do what you're doing, And it's, there's two things to it. There's obviously passing on your knowledge and helping the next generation, right, achieve what you've achieved in the sense of being, doing something that they love. But there's also, you learn, again, I think everything always goes back to the self, right? I think you learn a lot about yourself when you mentor somebody. Because it's just like they say, when you teach, you're also teaching yourself, right?
Or you're at least outlining what you already know that you don't know that you know.
Exactly. And I think when you step into a role of mentoring somebody, and mentorship it comes in many different forms, it's all in your definition of it. Like some of my best mentors have also been really close friends of mine too. But it's given me it's that outside perspective of somebody looking at you and seeing where you're at in your life. And because a lot of my mentors have been older, right? Looking at where you're at in your life and being able to look down the road and see where you could be if you did these certain things, right?
Just like I was looking at my friend's dad, just as I was looking at him.
Exactly. So it's getting that outside perspective, because it's really hard to step outside of ourselves and kind of look and go, what's going on there? What am I doing? That's a big part of my journey as a person, is trying to step out of a moment where I feel like this is not the best version of myself that's really being presented right now. What am I doing, and how can I make that different, especially when you're interacting with people and clients, So it's just taught me so much about myself. And so I feel like being able to mentor other people now, first of all, I just feel it's like my social obligation to pass it on, right? Because I was fortunate enough to have mentors, I want to give that gift on as well. But I think I still have a lot to learn about myself too, in what I'm doing, my work, I think...
Maybe mentoring is almost like learning about yourself in a sense.
In a sense,
where you're kind of taking the stock of how you made the decisions that you made, and it helps you see the future through what positive decisions you made that did help you get here, and really to take stock of what you did as a practice in mentorship, that you're like, no, what I did, that's true, I did do that. I could do that now, but in this way. And there's that, but there's also that fulfillment of helping others. It's a deep calling that we all have, that many people like myself attempt to resist because they're so self-centered. But I think as soon as you give into it and you feel the response from being selfless, it's an overwhelming joy. And it's like, oh, wow, that was amazing. I need to do that again.
Yeah.
It's not all about me.
It really does feel, I'll tell you, some of the best experiences I've had professionally have been helping people, younger people, see their potential and their talent and tap into that, and I think it's crucial. I think everybody needs a mentor in life, because mentorship is not just about a particular profession, whether it's photography or cinematographer. It's also you're taking somebody under your wing as a relationship, a personal relationship. And so again, learning more about yourself. What are your limitations? What are your fears? What do you need to push past in order to get to the next stage of your professional career? Because a lot of what holds us up in life is ourselves, right? I'm so guilty of putting limitations on myself, saying, oh, I can't do that, or that looks like it's really hard, instead of saying, yeah, I think I can do that. How do I get to that point?
Or you can do it, and it will be difficult.
Yes, exactly.
And you will be scared. and you will lie awake at night.
Yeah.
But you can do it. You should.
And I think young kids today are really craving, they're craving that kind of mentorship from older people, like, hey, I need some direction here. I think a lot of young kids are lost, which is why they go to social media and they go to their phones, because that's the only solace they find in their life that's not that's trying to emulate human connection when it's not really human connection. You know what I mean? And so if you can have somebody older that you look up to that is doing something that you want to do, or is living a life that you would think you would want to live,
Right.
I think that's invaluable, because it's just passing it on to the next generation to, to make it a better world,
Yeah, I also think it's midlife is a time when you get to a point of I think the first 40 years you're consuming, and you have an obligation for the second 40 to, in some sense, give that back.
Yeah.
And I felt that just in my own disposition of consumption of experience, consumption of excitement, consumption of all of that. And then like this transition to, all right, I've informed myself through experience. Now, how can I help? There's that kind of transition point where your fulfillment now aims at something different, rather than consumption and informing yourself as your aim. Now it's a little more so giving back, and the fulfillment that I start to feel from just guiding my own kids is just so deeply fulfilling. But then if you're like, all right, I can do that in this sense, do I have anything to offer that I've done, not as a parent, but as just a business owner, whatever, that I could give back in the same way?
Yeah.
That same fulfillment that you feel in being a parent and able to help and give of yourself with no real return other than the emotional return, you start to feel start to feel a desire for that you can't really identify. But if you've been able to achieve something, then you're able to give that back. And that's really important, I think. So
Mentors come in so many different forms too. My best mentor I've ever had is one of my best friends too. And and it had nothing to do with my profession. It had everything to do with me, my journey, where I was at, what I was doing with my life. And again, how he could see, well, this kid, I say kid, even though I was like 30, in my 30s at the time. Right. But, I see where he's at, and I see that he could be so much further down the road. And I'll forever be grateful for that, because it truly changed my life. You get stuck in complacency, and you're not really sure, you don't even know how to diagnose whatever is going on with yourself until you get somebody on the outside that's like, hey, kind of shaking you like,
right.
You see what you're doing?
That additional perspective.
It's additional perspective. And he's an artist too, interestingly enough. So what I've learned about him as an artist too is it's not just it's not a profession. It's also a life philosophy, which you never really connected those two dots before.
Yeah, I've in my last 10 years have gotten so philosophical. I've mimicked my dad, he just constantly pontificates, and he's very intelligent, and he's a pastor, so it's dovetailed with his profession as well. And it's been really great for me to be able to have that as a father figure while going through issues with faith and everything else. But just as a person, I've been so lucky to have a father that can handle that kind of complication, even in the face of his own profession. You'd think like, oh no, a spiritual religious leader's son is not on the same page. From his posture towards me, it's not even an issue as much as, oh, we get to engage deeply on this subject now. That's great, and I'm sure he lies awake at night with issues about it, as every father would. But for me, it's just been the greatest thing to have a father capable of letting me ride on his back while he's swimming, in a sense, teaching me how to swim.
Yeah.
Other friends of mine have not had that, and it really hard for him.
Yeah,
You know?
it's very difficult. I mean, you need I think especially for a son, to have a father figure that you look up to that can have that kind of depth is invaluable. You know?
I wrote a thing a while ago that I shared with my dad that he wasn't the greatest small child father, in that his talent lied in the depths. In when he would interact and play in the kiddie pool, it was like, "Hey kids, what are you doing? Let's play." He's not a naturally, kids don't know, whoa, this guy's fun,
Yeah.
But he definitely tried, and so as a kid I knew that it was just a little clumsy, and I was just like, okay, Dad. But he was the dad I absolutely needed in my 30s. Like, it would be disastrous for me had I not had that. And I haven't really even known my father to the depth that I know him now until I went through this experience, which is such a gift. And the thing I'd written was like, when I was a kid, speaking of things floating by, that's weird.
What
Plywood.
is that?
I think it's just plywood. But the analogy for me was that we were a bunch of kids in a kiddie pool, and all of a sudden there's this deep sea diver with all of his equipment coming through the pool. That's what my father was built for, was the deep sea diving stuff, and we're all in the kiddie pool. But now that I'm at that drowning in the depths, my dad's there with a rebreather, like, it'll be all right, here, breathe here, we'll get you back up to the surface. And you need those different relationships, those different people, that when you fall to the depths, you need those people that are there, that have been there, that know how to navigate it to help you. And to not have that is disastrous. To have it in business when you're looking for a mentor, it's like, I've jumped into the deep end, I need some help, so.
Yeah, I was scared to death of starting my own business because, again, I didn't know anything about running a business. And
especially as a creative, it's
as
not
a creative,
natural.
it's not natural. I just wanted to go out and get me work, and I'll just go do it, right? But to develop those skills, I'm grateful for it because it's opened up a whole new part of my brain that I didn't even think was possible. Right?
You can approach business creatively.
I can approach business creatively, and it all comes down to personality too. And when you have a personality that is open, where you can have a meeting, sit down with creatives, with architects or whoever, and articulate yourself and be able to convey your creative vision, or this is how you approach things. And that stands out, I think, to somebody that's maybe just a little too rigid and a little too business. I think there's a fine balance there. So
I think you're tapping on something there, that if you're naturally creative, clear articulation might not be your natural talent, but it's what you need to build to bridge your creativity into being useful. Because art pulls from the abstract subjective to the more concrete objective.
Yes.
And so that is a process of articulation. Like, all right, you sense this emotionally, subjectively, and you can tell it's there, and you can see it, but you got to be able to translate it to these people who don't see it.
Yeah.
And that is the work of art that stands in the middle that you get hired to do. And so, is art incapable of being paid for, like commercial art, like Norman Rockwell, like what we do? Is that art? To a degree, but I'd say it's about 10 to 25% art, and the rest of it is a technical exercise of meeting preconceived concepts that have to be, ticked and everything else. That's why we have the what would you call commercial? The word commercial in relation to art. It's the identifier that this is not just art. This is commercial art.
Commercial art. Yeah. There's a business to it.
Yes.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. And I never really wanted to be a artist per se, because even in the movie industry, the reason they call it the movie business is it is a business, right? And you learn very quickly that there is limitations to creativity, especially when you're working with a very large group of people, because again, everybody has an opinion of how they think it's supposed to be. And to navigate that diplomatically
It's gotta be so hard.
it is a difficult, very, very difficult exercise. And again, you know, some people are built for that. Some people can do it, and it's not a big deal. That took an incredible amount of energy on my part that I didn't want. I knew if I continued to expend that kind of energy on a daily basis, it would destroy me, you know. And again, that's not a resentful statement. It's just, I love movies. I love the art of storytelling, visual storytelling. It's interesting how when you grow up and you're a kid and you think, I want to be a film director. Like you don't really realize, hey, is this really what I want to do? I mean, this is what I say I want to do. And it looks glamorous and it looks exciting. And yeah, I love movies. And it isn't until you actually step into it that it's like, it's not for everybody, you know?
Yep.
And so I tell people, like, I have kids that want to go off and make movies. And I say, okay, well, you know, are you ready for this? Or how do you think you'd handle this situation? I try to pose questions to them of scenarios to get them thinking like, is this the path that I want to follow? And if it is, go off and do it.
You're going to do great.
You know, you're going to do awesome. But it is kind of interesting how you do. I mean, I always knew I wanted to work in visual arts, so to speak. I just wasn't sure where that path was going to lead me. And now that I'm in it, I honestly couldn't picture it being any other way, you know?
I interviewed a woman a while ago for a podcast that I was doing on faith and such. And she was, I believe she had been, I forget what religion it was, but she was at the forefront of fighting to be able to act as a pastor within that religion because they wouldn't let women do that, right?
Interesting, okay.
So she thought, that's what I want to do, but they won't let me. All right. So she spent like 15 years fighting the system. Finally, she gets the opportunity. She already had her doctorate and everything else. I think I remember it this way. She gets in the position, and within a year, she realizes it's not what I want to do. And she spent 15 years fighting to do it. That's why, you know, I get that laws and boundaries and norms are there for some reason, but they're not always meant to be laws and boundaries that don't get crossed for any reason. And for someone like that to not even have the ability to put their toe in, to know, like, I think I'd like to do this. And then be like, oh, you know, I don't. She spent 15 years of her life, and what she can say now is that I've opened the door for other women to be able to partake and know if this is what they want to do. And if they find out it is what they want to do, they're going to be able to have a path to success. And that's what she was able to accomplish. But the odd thing is, at least that we can identify here now, is that let's be careful with boundaries, that we don't just tell people you can't do that, because we can't really articulate why you can't do that, but we're not going to let you. It's just, that was so sad to me to hear that there was this odd thing where this person could not even find out that they didn't like a thing that they thought they would like.
Because of restrictions.
Because of societal restrictions.
Yeah.
And
that is sad because, you know, at least with what I was pursuing, it was like the restriction really was more networking and connections, you know, just finding that opportunity and that foothold to be a production assistant or whatever. And I was fortunate enough to, again, have those opportunities. But yeah, it's, going back to the mentorship thing too, this is an important thing if you're mentoring somebody that's, you know, wants to do what you're doing, right? Too, is to also pose those questions of like, okay, well, this is what's entailed, but also this is all the work you're going to have to put into it.
To give them the, like, this is going to be
This is
difficult
the reality
in this
check.
sense. This doesn't go away unless you can come up with a new thing that none of us have.
100%.
That's always going to be difficult. Maybe AI will take it away eventually, but right now, this is going to be a large part of your life. If you can't handle it, you're not going to like this.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah.
And I think the most important lesson for anybody in anything is to be comfortable with failure.
Oh, that's so important because that's how you learn.
Yeah, and I was not raised that way.
Well, to value failure.
Yeah, to value, exactly. I was afraid of failure, and I wanted to be perfect, and I wanted to, all these ridiculous notions that, you get in your head. And so I put limitations on myself before I even gave myself an opportunity to learn anything. And it took me a while to get to a point where I realized, like, yeah, I think falling on your butt is good every once in a while, because it gives you an opportunity to get back up.
Like my Photos by Trent Instagram account.
See?
I'm doing what I really want to do, and nobody likes it.
See? But you're practicing what you preach. That's important.
Right. Like and this is the thing I found, what you're saying, I've connected with through the distancing from religion. It's like I could see something that I didn't think other people were seeing.
Yes.
And in identifying it to myself, I offered it up to them to see if they see the same thing. They say no. Like, how can you not see that? It's right there. They just want to, look at it, Well, the realization is that there's a system of conscientious people and open-minded people for a reason. Because if everyone is open-minded, who's going to be the judge to say, not yet, your idea is not clear enough? You might think you know that, but if we do what you're thinking now, the trajectory of those decisions may be absolute chaos.
Yeah.
So keep doing your work. And when you get to a point where you can convince us who are stuck in the mud, who are squares, we will relent, because it will be unavoidable that you've found the truth, and we'll accept it, we'll adopt it into our now traditions, and we'll move on. Mm-hmm. I just, in my ignorance, kept thinking that if I see it, everyone else should see it, and that's it. But if that's the case, no one's going to make a really, really clear argument for what is, actually true beyond what we can perceive, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. We need the balance. We need the conscientious to keep the open in check. And we need the open to pull the conscientious out of what they won't come out of when they should. But you got to make the case. And if you don't make the case, don't expect people to. And if they're not, you have made the case. So get over it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah, that's a weird one. So where do you find yourself now in your career? And what are you having success with? What do you find to be the difficulty, and where are you hoping to go and grow and all that?
Great questions. Well, I will tell you, I'm at a point now in my business and what I'm doing. Very nice sailboat, by the way.
Not mine.
Not mine.
Mine is that little 12-foot piece
I
of
think
tin
I might
that
be
has
able to afford that one, yeah.
It's so funny. We came all the way across the country with that on top of our car. And, it's just a junk aluminum boat from there. And then you look at all these other boats. Like,
but you know what? You're on the water. You still get that experience. What's interesting is, so in building this business of mine, I've as a consequence of doing the work that I'm doing, and it's getting promoted on social media, because I do a lot of content for organizations that post to social.
Before we go too far, what is the if you were to break down in a percentage of the work that you do, what percentage is still photos of architecture, video production for other stuff?
I would say it's about, right now, 25% architecture, 75% video production, and a lot of it is digital marketing for organizations.
Mm-hmm. And that's the majority of your background.
That's the majority of it. Yeah, that's video production is my background. Mm-hmm. Like film production, video production is my background. Still photography has always been the passion that's slowly turned into a means of income. But I'm getting to a point now in my business where, and this always happens when you're a sole proprietor, you build yourself up to a level of success where you're like, if I continue to get more clients and continue to do this myself, it's not sustainable.
So in your organization, is it solely you currently?
Solely me.
Now,
yes.
How many independent contractors do you commonly bring on for like a video project?
Typically, well, I'll tell you, actually, within the last 3 years, it's maybe been a handful for,
so not
for a
that
couple
many.
Of projects, yes.
And is most of that because of the advances in technology that allow you to not need those people?
It's a combination of that and also the form factor. Mm-hmm. A lot of what I'm doing is very run and gun, me with a camera capturing moments and then cutting together a montage.
Okay.
Or if I am producing a more narrative piece, I have kind of pared down my production to a very minimalist setup that's very effective, that most of the time I can handle it. I can do it. However, it's getting to a point now where I am starting to look at, okay, I need to bring somebody else on that is definitely not just a one-off, but a more consistent collaborator that can share the responsibility. Because while I'm doing all of this, I'm still working on the architectural front and building up a reputation with these firms and trying to get in. And obviously that takes energy as well, and it takes time.
That takes usually specifically you, unless you have someone who's a really good sales personality that can just brag on you and give you that sense of like, oh, he's so good. He has a person in between us, and then he just comes in talent for the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that works with architects or not, but that's the difficulty for me in interacting with architects, is that they're able to outsource what they do to other individuals to make money. But if someone's calling you or I to photograph a piece of architecture, it better be you or I that shows up.
Yes.
I can't send someone else to do that. So that's a weird thing. Like, an architect can have an office where they oversee an aesthetic arc of all the projects, but not with a photographer. It's you.
Yeah.
So that's a weird one.
It's a weird one, and it just requires time and a nurturing of the relationship, basically. And I'm working with one particular firm that is connected to my friend, and so he's such a great friend, and I would consider him, I don't know if I consider him a mentor, but more just a friend that is very much interested in seeing me get my foothold in it.
And can be honest with you.
And is honest with me. Like, I
board.
like this, I don't like this, I like what you did here, but he basically said, I'm going to make it my mission to get you into, I've already basically gotten into the good graces through my work of them saying, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. It's now working because when you're photographing, the majority of the work that they do is high-end custom homes. So you're also working with the builder, you're working with the interior designer, there's a group, and all of them have their photographers they like to use. So now it's me trying to navigate my way in to a field where there's already established.
Trying to elbow other people out.
And also not ticking off those people that are like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years, and who's this kid that's coming in and thinking he can shoot photos, right? So it's a very kind of, but I'm playing the long game, I'm just going to be patient with it and continue to put the work into it. And at the same time, my success in my business has allowed me to do this. Otherwise, I would not have the time nor the resources to pursue it.
Right. So you're using resources from your video side to
Yes.
gain. And I did the same thing, but in reverse.
Okay.
I would say probably 85 to 90% of my work is still photography, and then 25 to, depending on the year, is videography of architecture usually. Some other projects mixed in there that have more human interest type stuff. But yeah, in general, it's a flip of what you do. And I did the same thing. I used my still photography I knew that, all right, these technical instruments that we're using are going to be doing both things.
Yes.
If I'm not capable of doing both things, I'm going to be out. So figure it out.
And technology really has helped people like you and I, be able to do that. I mean, I've worked on DSLRs for years and years and years. And I've seen the advance of video on DSLRs and now mirrorless cameras, of course, and it's just crazy how good it is now. I mean, when I was going to film school, I had a digital 8mm camera, and we were using Final Cut Pro version 1, and it was it was such a process, And now I look at everything all the tools that we have, the drones and everything. I'm like, my gosh,
Yeah, you remember when they have an aerial shot?
Yeah.
Now it's just like, okay.
Yeah. And honestly, I bought a drone for my business. Well, even before I had my business, I bought a drone because I knew people were going to ask me, do you have a drone? Oh, yeah. And sure enough, I got it and started doing these jobs, and they're like, hey, we want some aerials. Do you have a drone? Yeah, I do.
Sure. Do you have the new Mavic that has the 28x zoom?
I have the first Mavic 3 that came out, which
Okay.
is the dual lens system, which is
Okay.
actually a really, really nice drone.
Yeah.
And that was my third drone that I bought, and I still use it all the time.
I think I had the same one before I upgraded to the current one that has that zoom capability, and it's a game changer. Like, I didn't even want it. My studio manager made me upgrade because we shoot a lot in like downtown Boston or around Portland, around the airport.
Okay.
And there were some chip tech issues that weren't going to be resolved with the old drone before, I think, December. And we had a bunch of work coming up, so I was like, just sell it, we'll get the new one. As soon as I put it up and I did the zoom, I was like, oh, because your ability of compression and movement is insane.
Okay.
And all of a sudden you're like full cinematic. It's just like you can just zoom in on the tower up there and have the palm trees move in the foreground so incredibly, and like oh, hey, there's a seal bobbing around out there. But yeah, you can just do like that zoom for both photos and video is just mind blowing. It's like, oh wow, okay.
That's the frustrating thing, you know, the double-edged sword of technology, right? But everything comes out so quickly. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, I have invested in medium format digital now for quite a few years.
Nice. What are you using?
And now I'm using the Fuji 50S too,
Okay.
which I love.
Color science. That's what everyone says about the color science.
Yeah. I mean, Fuji, I had an X-T3 before. I've always been a Canon shooter. You know, I have R5s. That's what I do majority of my video work with, unless it's a higher end project, and then I'll use a nicer camera, typically Blackmagic. But Fuji, so I had Hasselblad, right? I thought, okay, I'm going to get the camera that they took to the moon, right? You know, and to be fair, Hasselblad is a great system. So I started with the H systems. I had two, an H3 and an H4 system. Far too clunky and big for me to go out and shoot. Like, it's definitely a studio camera in my opinion. But then, of course, the X1D comes out. I got an X1D too. Loved it. I love the camera. The lenses are fantastic. Very expensive system, as you know, to get into. But again, I was looking at this camera as I'm going to use this for my architectural photography. And to get into using my tilt shift lenses, my Canon tilt shift lenses and this and that, it was a bit more cumbersome than I wanted to deal with, to be quite honest with you.
You could make the Canon lenses to the Hasselblad?
Yes, through a couple of different third-party adapters. I think actually Hasselblad makes an adapter too, which is insanely expensive. But again,
Hasselblad makes an adapter for Canon lenses.
yeah, I believe so. I believe they had. I believe there was an option, but it was very expensive, like ridiculously expensive.
Have you tried the Fuji 30 tilt shift yet?
I have not.
Neither have I.
And I knew Fuji was going to come out with tilt shift lenses. I'd heard that, of course, after I bought my system and I had my Canon lenses. But to be quite honest with you, what sold me on Fuji was, again, I'm looking for ease of use. I'm looking for compatibility. I'm already invested in an EF system, right? EF glass. And so I did my research on Fuji, and then I just happened to see a guy that was selling a Fuji with the EF adapter on Marketplace. And I met him, brought my tilt shift lens, and I'm like, slap it on there, and I look at it. There's no vignetting. And I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah, you barely get vignetting even at the extent of it.
Yes, exactly.
Like on the 24 and 17.
Yeah.
50 is a little more, but.
I don't have the 50. That's the only lens I would like to acquire.
The 17 and the 50 for me are super sharp. The 24 is a little soft.
A little soft?
Odd
okay. The 17 is amazing. I mean, I was using that for interiors. The first time one of the first jobs I had with my Fuji after I got it, and I was just blown away at how good it looked. And
yeah,
so,
I almost feel like I can zoom in farther on the 17 than the 24. Like with the same wide angle, I can zoom in on the same width, and I get more quality out of the 17 than the 24. But I don't like the distortion that you get.
Yeah, the distortion is always tricky with me too, and I'm trying to learn the balance between, do I need to go this wide, or can I just stick with the 24 and not have the curse of distortion? But yeah, you know, I mean, the 100S2 is like, that's the camera I want. you know, and at some point I'll get it. But I'm really impressed with what Fuji's done. And I'm also a big fan of medium format. I think it's just a game changer when it comes to quality and look, right?
Yeah, my
of
studio, my friend downstairs, Chet, he upgraded to the GFX 100 first. And he's like, oh, this new medium format. And I'd never used medium format. It'd just always been kind of an out of reach thing for me. And when he got that, and the price was, you know, it was steep, but nowhere like the other ones, I was like, why not? And I still don't like the file systems and the complexity of Fuji stuff.
Yeah.
Once you learn it, but it's not intuitive. But once you work with the files, you're just like, oh, I get it. The first image we took was in studio, and the flash was way too powerful, and it was just a white image. I was like, oh, wait a minute. So we got everything dialed in and kept playing around. Got it into the computer, and that first image, it was completely white. My editor just grabbed the slider and pulled it down, and it looked perfect. Just perfect.
The dynamic range, yeah.
I was like, oh. And he had told me, like, we're going to have so much more space requirements, blah, blah, blah. But as soon as he started working on the files, he's like, these are way more information, but way easier.
Yes.
And the quality is there. It's just amazing.
Well, interestingly enough, the sensors on the Fuji are the same sensors they use in Hasselblad too. It's just different architecture.
Okay.
One thing I will say about the Hasselblad system, especially the X series, is the menus are the best on any camera I've ever used.
Their menu system probably reflect their aesthetic exterior design that they...
And honestly, that camera in my hand
felt good.
I mean,
now
I'm
you're
like,
making me
this
want
was,
one.
oh, it was, I hated to get rid of it. And at the same time, I'm like, you know, maybe down the road I'll get, because of course they come out with the 100 after it. Mm-hmm. I'll get one down the road, but you know, I got to think about things practically, you know.
Yeah, the practical side of my brain would keep me from Hasselblad until I'm like very independently wealthy or something. Maybe.
It's just, yeah, it's insane. And honestly, that was the huge detractor was the cost of lenses and all of that. It's just like, well, if I really want to invest in this, it's going to be way beyond my means at this time. And yeah, I mean, Fuji's great. Okay. Yeah. And honestly, people are not, you would hope, right? The hope is people are not going to look at your image and go, well, he shot that on a Fuji instead of a Hasselblad. Like, no, nobody
I
does.
always thought, like, even when I was shooting all Canon, that, well, if I have the extra grip on it, clients will be more impressed. And now that I have a medium format, they'll be more impressed. And I still drop it thinking that people will go, oh, medium format, you know, no one cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's like if the image looks good at the end, that's what they care about.
Yeah.
And if that's fallen short, you'll know. So if I was recommending like someone starting out, you know, you could get a Canon 5D Mark IV, which my son uses for shooting wildlife. You'd be fine.
It's a great camera.
You'd be fine. You need tilt shift, but you could start with a 24 to 70 and a Mark IV and one light and a laptop, and you'd be done.
Yeah.
And I could still be using that setup and be fine.
Yeah.
I'd have a black sheet and a white sheet and one strobe on a stand with a little battery pack at the bottom. Donezo.
Done.
Completely done. Your tripod and stuff. But everything that you add on can start to complicate and slow your process down. I've got a really good system going now with, you know, the Fuji and everything. But yeah, it's the technology, the increase at this point. It's worth it going to the medium format, but that's a huge cost jump.
Yeah.
So if you can't afford it, don't stress yourself out.
Yeah. But honestly, for what I bought my 50S2 for was less than what I spent.
Yeah.
You know?
And like I could sell my medium format 100 right now. It's worth the same as a 5D Mark IV.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was just kind of weird.
It's insane. But again, you know, it was like, okay, 50, 100 megapixels. Am I really doing the kind of work right now that's going to demand that kind of megapixel count? Not really, you know.
Yeah, the thing I do appreciate is I can shoot wide and just crop in.
Exactly.
Crop in.
And that's where it becomes very valuable, for sure. But I don't know, man. It's an exciting time to be in this because of, again, the technology. It's so funny too because I run into photographers now that are, I shoot film. My clients want me to shoot film. And it's surprising. Like I met photographers up in LA, and I'm like, oh, what are you shooting on? Oh, I'm shooting, Kodak, whatever. And I'm like, really? Yeah, my clients want me to do that. Okay.
What
great.
kind of clients are they working with?
I mean, this is some of it's fashion, like commercial fashion stuff, and I get it.
I could see that in fashion, no way in architecture.
No way in architecture.
Unless it's all natural light and there's no incandescent lights involved, and it's all like a singular color tone of light. Yeah, I could see that. That'd be fun, but yeah.
But no, it's compared to digital, there's just no. But yeah, when you're photographing people, I will say, like, I still love shooting film. My Rolleiflex 2.8C is my favorite camera. I love that thing. Still have shot the best portraits I've ever shot on that camera. Right. The way that film renders skin tones and the dynamic range of it, it's beautiful. But practical,
time effect.
Yeah. I look at my film photography as that's my passion.
Kind of your art.
My art, sense. Right? Yeah. I'm trying to set up a darkroom at my place and get back into processing and doing that whole thing. A friend of mine just gave me a 4x5 camera.
Oh, wow.
He was like, hey, I know you're into this. Here's one of my, and he was an architectural photographer, interestingly enough. Did a lot of work for Caltrans and photographing bridges, really, really cool work. And we got to talking, and he's like, I don't want to sell this thing. Like, I'd rather give it to somebody that I know is going to use it. Yeah. And I'm excited to step into it, but it's like, oh man, this is a whole other world, right?
Yeah, you're gonna have to do this on personal time.
Yes, that's a personal time, and then I've been fascinated by like wet plate photography and stuff like that. There's some photographers I
like
follow.
colloidal silver,
colloidal silver and stuff like that. There's some guys that I follow that do just some amazing stuff.
The skin tones in those are crazy.
Yeah,
those are really neat.
Yeah,
I've never delved into any of that. I've never really even shot film. So,
but again, this is all. This is not what's going to pay my bills by any stretch.
Not unless you get into some really like, I'm an artist.
Yes. There's my brother, he lives in Urbana, Illinois, and his right next to University of Illinois. It's beautiful there.
Where is that in Illinois?
That is in the middle part of Illinois. It's about 3.5 hours south of Chicago.
Have you been there?
Yes.
It's great summers, but
and I've only been there in May and September, so by design.
I went to school in Southwest Michigan.
Okay,
and it was so hard for me.
Midwest winters are he has a next door neighbor though that is my brother's a doctor and my sister's a scientist, and their neighbor is a chemist and teaches, I think, at the university. And they got to talking, and they said, "Oh yeah, he experiments with all sorts. He like makes his own film and does all this stuff." And he started doing these prints and all these crazy photographs, like literally in his basement, and ended up in a gallery in New York and was selling to I think he sold some of his work to Elton John, and so it's one of those situations where once in a million kind of opportunity where you just hit a particular market and you're able to be successful.
That he's making his own film.
Yeah. When you're a chemist, I guess you can do all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But I never got to see his. I wanted to go down and check out his darkroom and see what he was doing, have him explain it, to somebody that knows nothing about chemistry, but hopefully can learn something. But I just thought, wow, that is so cool. That's the kind of stuff where you think, that would be a fun little passion project that if it took off, wow, great. Right. But right now, that kind of stuff is exciting to me, but my time, as I've explained, is so limited that it's all about my business and getting that. So it's like
So how do you see growing your business in architecture currently?
Well, I think...
And what's the complication and where's the foothold?
The complication is going to be in devoting enough of my time to do it. My time and my energy and my availability. And the way that I will achieve that is by bringing on other people to help offset the workload of the video production.
Okay.
So that's the way, that's in my mind, that's how I'm kind of designing it, so that it will be a place, a situation where I'm really more of a creative director in charge, and the shooting and the editing and all the stuff that I'm doing now can be handed off to somebody else.
Right.
You know, that's the ultimate dream for me. But honestly, even if I was to hire one person to help with my workload, that would open up so much more time for me to dedicate to.
Have you been in a position of seeking an employee, hiring, and all that before?
I have not.
Let me assume that you're as dumb as me.
Yes,
Without being
probably
offended.
So.
You probably have much more experience than me, but the stupid mistakes I've made in that sense is I, for one, didn't really understand what I was hiring for. And like my studio manager, Tim, was a complete idiotic mistake that was the best thing ever.
Okay.
He's incredible. And I had nothing to do with it. It was just an accident that I lucked out in getting him. Best thing ever. I tried hiring other people before and did it wrong in so many ways. One of the ways is the first studio manager I hired, really good guy, really talented. I was good friends with him. But I set him up and said, I'm just going to give you all the work I can. When there's more than you can handle, let me know and I'll help you.
Okay.
Which sounds fine. But when you're on the receiving end of that, as another guy or just a driven person who doesn't want to admit they can't handle what you give them, you know, that's a little like, help me. I can't handle what you've given me. You know, it was a bad managerial setup, and that didn't last long term because I didn't manage her well. And that was all my fault, I think. My wife kept hammering into my head, like, look, set it up so, first of all, you are the captain of the ship. And especially for me, and I don't know if this translates into other creatives as well, but there needs to be one captain of the ship. And I was trying to seek more of a partnership role in that because I didn't want to risk as much. I wanted someone to be emotionally involved and not need my guidance as much. So I could just depend on them and only lose money.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work well that way. It didn't for me. And with Tim, I said, all right, it's just going to be, if I'm asking you to work, you're getting an hourly wage. You tell me what you want, I pay you, and whatever time you want to take off, you get to take off. So he's very much an independent contractor in a sense, but he's a full-time employee, and I let him know how much I appreciate him, and he handles his own schedule, and I pay him exactly what he asks. And those three things make a really happy employee as long as the work in the day-to-day, what they're dealing with, is something that they enjoy. He got a little overloaded this summer, fall, because of the weather. We had so much rain that our shooting just kept getting pushed out. And so it wasn't bad for me. I just got another day off, but then less tighter shooting in. Well, he does all the post.
Okay.
Which is a great arrangement if you can get there eventually.
Yes.
Because, well, that's a different story. But anyways, it just made so much more post-production for him in this smaller window.
Yes.
And it was just like, whoa, too much. So that's what was really difficult. But in hiring someone to manage these other things, to have those things offloaded, just is the best thing ever. So from my perspective, I would encourage you to move forward with that, but just, don't do stupid things like I did. Look at me, I'm such a mentor type.
See, look at that. That's an example of mentorship right there. I actually have a few, I'm not quite at the stage where I think I need to pull the trigger. I'm very close, and so I'm trying to anticipate. And so I've actually been having meetings and talking to a few people that I know, and I'm getting closer to having somebody lined up for that, which feels really good. But I agree with you. I need to still be the captain of the ship, because a lot of my clients that are hiring me for this stuff, they see my style, the way I film and the way I edit, and that's what they like. Yeah. So this person that comes on board is going to need to know how to do that.
The other thing I would say that will dovetail with your video production is that architectural clients do benefit from reels. And if you can produce reels that are educational and informative and entertaining, that's a really, really high value target to hit for an architectural client that will then maybe get you in the door to shoot their still stuff, which they already might have some old codger who's shooting their still stuff. If you're going for a firm that's established, they're already going to have still photographer relationships, but you might be able to get your foot in the door with, well, we have this one project, maybe we'll, and he did a great job on these reels, and so I've found that my still photography is helping me make a case to be the person that, like, hey, we can also do these great reels for you, and we're working at doing that with a client like you have with this friend that's kind of been a mentor but sounding board for you. The guy I started an architectural firm with decades ago, has also been a great client for experimentation of where what I do can go. And I'll come up with ideas and I'll just say, hey, let's do this for you for free and see if it works out. And if it does, great, you'll want to pay me for it. So, and in doing that, we found a lot of avenues that work well. And I've also been able to apply it to, like, oh, okay, I've proven that I can do this with this client. Now I can spread that over to more clients. But the other thing that in finding yourself being around 25 and 75 and wanting to get more architects on board, the thing I've found is if you just drive around, if you listen to the podcast, you might have heard this, drive around and find a thing that's being completed. The contractor will have access to it, and they might not have something in their contract that says they can't shoot it. So if they can shoot it, and you can offer to shoot it for them for free, but be clear, this is only for you. You can't give this to anyone. You can show people, but you can't give it to them for their use. Then you've gotten access to a project that you wanted to shoot, and then you have the ability to, again, go to the architect and say, but you have to make sure it's before the architect's been able to shoot it. You have to time it just right. And then if you can do the work and they see that it's good, they usually will have no qualms, if the work looks good, to just buying that direct, because they're paying a stock rate at that point.
Yeah.
Which is, hopefully you price your stock to be, not that much less than you would make shooting it to begin with, but it'll be less because there won't be expenses. Then, you're effectively using your time building your portfolio and potentially increasing your clients. And if you think of yourself as, I'm completely unproven at this point, but if I can work my way into getting access to this very valuable project and provide it to the contractor, because the contractor won't have that much of an opinion about the aesthetics of the photography as much as the architect will. So it's a lower bar that you have to jump over. You get to jump over that by offering your services for free. But then once you have it, you just got to make sure that they're not going to just give it away legally. And then you have the ability to say, here you go. That's a way of subverting the approval process. And it doesn't offend anyone, because the architect will say to the contractor, if they have a good relationship, if you do get your images to the contractor, and let's say the architect doesn't buy your images, it's fine. You still got them for your portfolio. The architect will say, just don't publish those anywhere, because we want to shoot it how we want to shoot it, and we want to get it published where we want to get it published, and blah, blah, blah. Still, you've got them for your portfolio. You haven't wasted your time, and you're on their radar as a tenacious little monkey that, maybe next project. Even so, it's all the way around as a win-win situation. Win-win-win-win-win, whatever.
I like that. I like that a lot.
But that was, for me, was the key getting in. Like, I saw, it was the first project that I shot that I was able to get. It got on the cover of a magazine, and that one gave me all these other projects with that magazine just because they coincided nicely. And that's a way to understand who are the gatekeepers for architectural photography, because architectural photography is very different from the movie industry, advertising industry, and all of that, because there's not as much money in it, and there's not the appropriate middlemen who hire and do all that typically. The larger architecture firms will have marketing people that you can just get an appointment with and go show your portfolio potentially. Most of the time, it's, you know, an under 30 person firm that won't really have a marketing person that you can go and meet with and convince, and, you know, so you have to kind of find ways of getting in there and showing your work. And that's one way to make money at showing your work, and it's their work, and potentially they buy it, and potentially then they hire you more. So for me, that was the most eye-opening thing I ever did, that was like, oh, this works 100%.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot of clients that way, not even doing it that way directly, but after an architectural shoot, a contractor will come and want the images, and then you get them as a client potentially as well, or a window manufacturer, or a bath and tub, whatever, Kohler, you know, all that. So there's lots of little ways of thinking about it like that that can give you that ability to start to reach into the architectural realm and get more long-term clients. And the other thing, the disadvantage you have is, in one sense, is your age, in that you're going to, I found an advantage when I was younger, that I was starting out and I was getting onboarded with firms that were nobodies yet.
Yes.
But I could identify, even though you're nobody, you have talent. So I went to them and would work with them. And as I was successful shooting their stuff, and as they were successful producing nice work, we grew together. So there's this trajectory that I was able to benefit from. In what you're doing, you're going to have that disconnect of being 45 and they're maybe 30, mm-hmm. and they'll have a different perception of you. But even if it's there might be a little bit more of daddy relationship, or like, oh, this guy's older, he'll help guide us through this. You know, there's always an angle to play. But if you get in with a up and coming firm and you do well for them, no matter your age, they'll, you know, keep you on, and they'll keep using you. And that's what you're fighting against when you go to firms that are established, guys that have been doing good work for them. So if you know, watch the obituaries, because that's going to be the openings for, you know, like, oh, their photographer died. Hey, you know, so there's all that angle of, you know, why is anyone going to choose you?
Yes.
And then the thing I've started doing recently is anything I want to achieve or a place I want to get to, imagine that place and then just tell the story backwards, mm-hmm. as if you're listening to the story. And, you know, you can kind of find that place where you can insert yourself into that story. Okay, let's try that, you know. And that to me is a good way of identifying where you want to be and making the roadmap to getting there, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this mentorship, and I'm not saying I'm mentoring you, but it's a weird thing to give advice and not feel like you're talking down to people. I don't like it. Not that I don't like it, but I'm worried, like I'm telling you things you already know, you know, and it's like, does this guy think I'm stupid? you know?
But you know, I think honestly that's more of how is the other person going to take it? You know,
yeah.
How's your mentee going to take it? You know,
problem is most of the time I just don't regard that, and I say what I'm going to say, and sometimes it's offensive, but
Sometimes you have to risk being offensive, though, I think, to communicate an idea.
I do that more than often.
I've was traditionally a people pleaser, and now I'm trying to step out of that mentality and just, you know, there's a way to diplomatically do things, but there's also just sometimes you just have to cut through the BS and just be straightforward, you know. Yeah. I think it's helpful, especially when you're mentoring somebody, to help them see that too.
The guy that contacted me, I told him, like, look, this is a good relationship in that I don't love you, and I'm not emotionally trying to protect you.
Yes.
I'm trying to make you successful, which means I'm going to flog some of your emotions that are not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that it's an odd thing. Yeah. When I tell my wife I speak to people like that, sometimes she's like, how can you, what? I don't know, they keep coming back. I just
As long as they keep coming back. See, there's value in that, though. And, and if anything, you're kind of teaching them to be a little more rough around the edges, you know? Because when you're dealing with any
little
kind of
bit
business,
thicker skin.
Yeah, you have to have some thick skin. You have to be willing to, you know, it didn't feel good for me to hear that interior designer say she didn't like my work, but at the same time, I'm like, well, I need to do something better then, don't I? you know?
Yeah, that's so valuable, so valuable.
And to find the balance in between being able to know what to do differently or basically criticize yourself without
Diminishing your confidence.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
admit, like, I simply made the wrong choice based on the information that I had at the time. It's nothing that I have to identify with as being an unchangeable part of me. It's just I made this decision with that information at the time. Now I have more information, so let's make new decisions.
Yes, exactly.
That's all.
That's all it is. You know, and I still make poor decisions all the time. I'm like, oh man, why did I do that? I need to do that better. Okay.
The hope is that
right.
you just make less poor decisions, and the experimental ones are able to be learned from and less consequent.
Well, that's, I think, what you were saying earlier about being able to, now you just know how to walk into a situation and shoot. Like it's instinct, right?
Yeah.
It's second
And
nature.
I can articulate it, which is really, like you were saying earlier, is very valuable for the client.
Yeah. So, and that comes with experience, right? Just comes with years of doing it and refining it and learning lessons. And, you know, that's again where I'm still a little bit early in this stage, but I think the thing that really struck me and it resonates the most is this entry through video, right? Trying to find an avenue that's different where people are like, wow, you're really good at that. And I've seen some of your stills. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. You know?
Yeah, you have this foundation and reputation and ability that's proven all day long. Now take that and apply it to the smaller need for architects. But that need, I think, will be growing exponentially in video as well.
I think so too. And that's why it's like I could just say, I'm done with video, just want to focus on stills, you know. I've had that thought before and I'm like, don't do that. You know, it's the kind of the old way of thinking of, well, you need to pick one thing, right? But really in this day and age, it's still photography and video have become more of a hybrid, and it's actually more of an asset to know how to do both of them than it is a detriment to you. At least in my thinking, in my experience of what I've done.
Absolutely, 100%. And I am able to actually, and I say this to say that I think you will be able to, obviously as well, that I'm able to outsource videography more than still photography. I can't outsource still photography yet for some reason. Haven't figured out how to do that. I have a relationship with a friend who's a really good in the moment people interaction videographer. And then my studio manager, Tim, is really good at the more architectural rigid movements and, you know, fixed like camera movement stuff, and the combination of those two in some of the video presentation or video spots that we do for architects is really powerful. And so I have one guy that we can just feed reels to now, and he's able to produce really interesting, really fun stuff for architects. So there's one sense that I've been able to, okay, I can manage this outside and someone else is actually doing the production who's talented, and I can move a little bit more into that director role and have someone else do that. And that's been a clumsy landing that I've been able to stick, that I'm not really talented as a manager, but I know I have to be, and I'm learning that. And being able to just get that one aspect of that part of my business up and running has been like 2 years in the making, which is kind of sad. I should be able to do that in like a couple days, but I think I just had to acclimate to the whole situation. I find that my ability for learning is very, very deep and slow. I'm quick-witted with humor and sarcasm and trite criticism. I can tear people down so quickly. Very not, if I chose, you know, but the going into areas where I have no understanding, I have to have like a weird marination time that is way longer than most people. But once I get it, I have the ability to be based in that understanding and reach pretty far with it. But it takes quite a long time. It's a weird understanding of myself that I'm coming to, that I still can't quite articulate.
That's
So
all part of the process, though, right?
that's the fun part of it at
Yeah.
this point to me. That is
Yeah.
still, this is kind of the part that's probably feeding me more so, and conversations like this and doing podcasting. I'm growing that side of my business intentionally because I do really enjoy it. So
It's fun. It's fun. And you know, I would say that my weakest point in my business is advertising, is promoting myself.
And how do you do that in, like such a cottage, small little thing that we
You
are?
know, it's so interesting because everything that I've been connected to business-wise has been through relationships and through jobs that I've done. I've not done one single bit of advertising. The only reason that I gained the last 3 clients within the last 6 months that I have is because they saw my work through another social media platform and they reached out to me. But, you know, I've had a domain website picked out and I haven't even had time to design it and do all of this stuff. My social media account is, you know, my Instagram account, there's so much more that I want to do. And I'm horrible with it because I'm so engrossed in trying to keep my business going of what I have, which is great, that it's like I never even thought, well, maybe I need to do this to even grow it more. And I think that's part of the step of bringing somebody else in, is having that time again to, okay, now I can sit down, I can work on my website, I can work on my portfolios and get things more current, you know.
I've found there to be an odd consumption of self in social media that, and I don't know how to describe that, but like the emotional gears grinding inside telling you, you better post something again today, rather than I'm inspired and I want to share.
Yes.
It's totally different.
Yes.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
And I don't relate well to that. That is draining me. When I'm inspired and share, that's like an epiphany thing. And that happens to me on like an, decade or annual cycle, not this like 3 posts a day cycle.
Yeah.
And why do I want to be involved in that, creative cycle turnaround and have that weight, personally held emotional weight on me to continue to put stuff out that people alike,
Yeah.
I need to be putting out what I've responded to because I've responded to it and not because I think people will like it. If I'm doing that, it's something completely different than what I should be doing. That's advertising. And if I'm going to be advertising, I find that I need to employ someone to do that about me more than me doing that. But social media is completely evolved around you personally doing it, which for the creative eats you. It consumes you, and not in a good way.
Yeah, I used to have that mentality of like, I need to post, or people tell me I need to keep posting stuff. I need to post stuff. But I've gotten to the point now where I'm so critical about, again, I want to post something that I really like, that I want to share. I don't care if it gets 2 likes or 200, So I've found myself, I'll sit down and, I have my archive of photos. I'll sit down, I'll pick one, or maybe I'll pick 2. I'll start working on them. And there's been plenty of times where I've sat and I've edited a photo for like 10 or 15 minutes and I'm like, no, this isn't hitting. And then other times I'll pick a photo and within 2 minutes I'm like, I like this. This is going up.
Right.
And if it's that definite in my mind that I like it, that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, I think I fall prey far too much to like, I got to put something out. This is good enough.
Yeah. And I think that's the social construct of social media, which is, you have to do this, and this is how you gain, followers. And, I'm not so much preoccupied by that now because my business isn't really, hinging on that right now.
Right.
Maybe at some point when it grows and I do want to attract more clients or specific type of clients that might be more relevant. But at this juncture, that's probably why I haven't dedicated time to it, because it's just, I haven't found it to be necessary.
I would imagine that you'd be best served by continuing to focus on creativity for clients, and then when you get into having to grow that aspect of it, to hire someone as an employee or outsourced thing, because if you're wired like me, it's not a good experience to try and please everyone.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you're doing with that. It's a weird thing, but it's part of existing in this day and age, and you can't get out of having to do that anyways. So
Yeah.
is what it is. I can't imagine, like, that's another hard thing from a mentorship position. When I got into this game and got to this position, the landscape was completely different. You know, you didn't have social media when I started at all. I think I started in around 2007, and at that time, and even for the next 5 years, Instagram was laughable for a professional organization like an architecture firm to market themselves through.
Yes.
They're not going to lower ourselves to that.
Yes.
But obviously that's not the case now.
No.
So it's been a weird and beneficial transition towards naturally pushing my work out there. And so now to get into the psyche of everyone is a different thing. There's no real experience at this point, long term, to tell you what to do, as much as it's a highly chaotic and creative time through social media and growing business to do your thing, which is brings a lot of stress and whatnot to it, but it's also a glass ceiling shattering in a sense, you know, that you have the ability to reach so many more people. So
yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, but I'd say overall, you know, even the people that have responded to my work that I have never met or even talked to, has not really affected my professional career in any sense. You know, I haven't gotten a phone call from somebody saying, "Oh, I saw your photo on Instagram and, you know, I want to hire you for this." Like, no, it's always been within my particular, you know, network of people that I've curated over the years. And so,
yeah, that would be an interesting, like, YouTube video series to follow your professional income and everything else over years. Say, all right, no more Instagram, no more social media at all. I'll just do it like old school. And does it affect my livelihood and income at all?
I put a cap on myself. You know, I go on Instagram. I'll go in spots, different parts of the day, but I limit myself to like at least no more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's like 5 minutes. Okay, I'm done. You know, I'll scroll through. I know that sounds...
So you don't find yourself in the toilet with your legs falling asleep?
No, well, okay. You know, I guess I have to admit, if I'm going to be truthful, there's been times where it's like, oh yeah, used to be like, you know, a book or a newspaper, and now it's your cell phone, right?
Right.
Now, there's been some times, honestly, interestingly enough, I probably spend more time if I had to pick a social media platform on YouTube, because there's so many resources of different, you know.
I don't really consider that social media for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
The Reels aspect.
The Reels aspect, yes. And that was a direct response to Instagram and all of that. But YouTube has been, if anything, it's the most positive resource for me, because I've discovered a lot of great photographers and learned so much, so much.
Yeah, you know. Anything you want to know how to do, you can find how to do it on YouTube. It's just, it's so incredibly valuable like that. And it consumes my attention, but it doesn't ask emotionally from me. Like, so what I consider social media to ask from me. That's weird. Yeah. Yeah,
it's very different. But you literally can type in anything. It's so funny when people ask me like, oh, how do you do this or that? I said, just go search on YouTube. You'll find at least a dozen videos that's going to show you how to do it.
To round this out, because I do have to get back to doing nothing.
As you should, sir. It's your vacation.
If you were to have 3 more questions of like, all right, you want your business to look somewhat like mine in the future. Like, what are the 3 more questions that would, and if you have more than that, it's fine too. But
well, you know, I would say what what I like about your work is it's very polished. It's very clean. It has a very
We can blame my studio manager, Tim, for that.
I was looking at your work actually earlier this morning. I went to your website and I was looking at and of course I scroll through your Instagram as well. But I was like, every one of these shots is like magazine, they say magazine quality. And it truly, that's the first thing that popped in my head.
I'll tell you immediately about that. Take everything out of the photograph you can until it feels empty. And then add back in what feels right. And as soon as it feels like too much, take the last thing out and you're good. Yeah. That every single time, I just eliminate, and then, it's empty. Now we've reached our rock bottom. Now let's only put back in what looks complementary. Because it's hard to tell when you have too many things to look at, distractions. And, keep that composition clean, keep the styling clean, keep the lighting clean. But now we're introducing a little more, as I said earlier, back in a little bit less plastic perfection in post-production is what we're pulling back from now, I think, trend-wise. But yeah, for that clean magazine quality, to me, I'm always eliminating stuff. If there's a question of leave it in or take it out as my first response.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like I've taken photos where it's just too busy. There's just too many elements in the photo, and I think some of my better photos are very simple and clean. The other thing that's always a challenge when you're running a business for anything is pricing yourself.
Oof.
And in this market, with
Inflation.
video, yes, inflation obviously plays a key. And then when you hire people, there's a consideration, so prices go up to offset cost. But, photography is kind of one of those weird things that I've, slipped and fell more than a few times on pricing myself and figuring out how I should value my work.
Right.
And I know there's different approaches. Like an example, somebody reached out to me. I did some, funny enough, event photography for them, but they were a vendor, a manufacturer, and they asked me to do some photo finishing for them. So they said, tell us how much, give us a quote at and so I basically went per image. I said, this is what it's going to cost per image to photo finish for you. And that seemed to work out, that formula seemed to work out fine. But, in terms of day rates or hourly rates and what do you charge for licensing for your photos, it's like, what have you found over the years to be the best resource in terms of building your own price structure,
Let's see. So from the very beginning, I called a guy that I knew in the region where I was at. I, at the time, had bought 3 buildings that were rental units with my business partner at the time. His parents had signed loans, and it was back when, if you had a pulse, they'd give you money. So I bought these absolute ghetto units, and I think I made about $1,000 over 10 years. It was sweet. Wow. So bad. So bad. But
better than losing money, I guess, right?
Yeah. But I just called him up, and it was like, he didn't know me, and I was nobody. And I was like, hey, I've got an apartment building. What's it going to cost for a day of your time to come and photograph it? Just as I have no idea what I could charge in this region. And I had looked at his work and thought, I can get there in somewhat short order. So that's something to aim at. And he shared it with me at the time. I think he was around 2,000 or 2,500. And so I just kind of used that as all right, there's my marker to aim at. And just the more people I came in contact to, I just tried to be as direct as possible about money right from the beginning. A lot of times if people ask me for an estimate, I'll just ask them immediately, well, what's your budget? Because why don't we start there, and I'll tell you what you can get for that.
Okay.
Now, some people will appreciate a direct, kind of thing like that, and other people kind of want to play a dance, you know. I'm not a good dancer in that sense, or in the other sense. And I gave someone an estimate once for $70,000 that should have been 11, because they added on a bunch of other vendors, and I just took all right, you're going to add another entity to this. And so at the time I was adding like $2,000 per entity that also wants to share the images if they're signing on the original contract. And usually it's like 1 to 2 entities at most. And so that at the time was roughly acceptable. And I was busy, I had all the work I needed. Unfortunately, it was a new person coming in at this position at this firm, and it was a pretty big firm, still is, and I've gotten them back as a client, and I've gotten in good with this person that it happened with back to a good relationship. But at the time, that year, I think is what it was, is I probably lost about $70,000 that year because I didn't do the estimate correctly. I did it correctly, but I should have not charged so much. And I think is what it was, is I probably ended up somewhere around 30,000 with all the add-ons. And then I looked at they didn't go with me. And at the end of the year, I had like $70,000 less of work with that client. And I was like, oh gosh, I think I did something bad.
It's always a balance, you know. It's like you don't want to price yourself out.
Don't want to leave money on the table.
But you don't want to leave money on the table. Because I've been there before. I've been like, wow, why did they say yes so quickly?
Exactly. So now on the flip side of that, the best client I've ever had, Lifetime Fitness, for financial gain. They're a big gym. You might know who they are. We shot a bunch of their stuff like in Laguna and Denver, all over the country. Really, really very well-paying jobs. Not a lot of their stuff would end up on our portfolio. It's usually a symphony of beige, as they would call it. And, you know, wasn't their big box gyms, you know, and we made them look great. They were great to work with, paid well, all that. But when they initially contacted me to shoot for them, I had pushback when you're trying to interact with someone who you consider to be talented is almost appealing for the person on the other end of it. Now, I'm not saying be difficult or anything like that, but they wanted to use me and they wanted to shoot on Saturdays, and I don't work on Saturdays, mostly for religious reasons. I'm not Jewish, but my Seventh-day Adventist is the religion that I came from, and they kind of are a little Jewish in that way. And so I was just kind of like, you know, you guys want to shoot on these days, and I'm not really into that. I'd love to work with you guys, but I don't, you know. Like a week later, they came back and said, give us the estimate. We'll see if we can work it out the other way. I was like, you're willing to work with someone who's complicated? All right. This is great, you know, and that worked out really well. I had a job with Marriott that my estimate was way higher than the next closest person. I think we were around the job they wanted. We were around 35, and the next closest estimate was around 15. And they came back and they said, hey, we've got this other estimate, you know, around 15. Can you match that? And I looked at the numbers. I looked at what they wanted us to do, and I just kind of said, that doesn't feel right. And it's not interesting subject matter. It's, you know, it wasn't Marriott. It was like one of these Courtyard by Marriott. It was something like that. And I knew it wasn't going to be anything high design or anything else. And so I just stuck to my guns and like, you know, and this is what it is if you want us to do it, and we'll knock it out of the park, but otherwise. And they ended up coming back and using us. And it was like a 2-day shoot, and later the guy that was the next estimate down, we had later posted the work, and he was like, hey, I was the next estimate. How'd that work out? And you know, I realized that there's something to sticking to your guns and saying this is my worth, I believe, and if you've got a honest perception of reality, you might be able to pull it off, and to have the self-respect and the confidence to say I've got enough work to jump at this and to lower my standards or whatever. Playing that game is absolutely anxiety producing, and you'll probably lose some jobs in playing that game, but it has worked out for me more than not. But I've given 3 examples there where I lost $70,000 worth of a client's work. I was able to repair that relationship, and then it's, even in the face of complication of not working on specific days and charging close to double what other people are charging, it did work out. Now, I can't exactly identify within there why they went with me and didn't go with me. I know with Lifetime, when they approached me, they said, we've been looking at your work for a long time. I've always wanted to work with you, and now I'm getting to the point where I'm able to put your stuff in front of the people who are approving or disapproving the budgets now, and we'd like you to come in and give us this estimate. So I knew the person trying to hire me was not emotionally connected to the money, but they were emotionally connected towards bringing my aesthetic onto the shoot. So I knew that they're going to be batting for me, and me costing more is no small thing. It says something that people who are in charge know, like, oh, this person is, if we're going to be paying more, you can assume that they're going to be potentially easier to work with, potentially better results. And if you have the website and all this stuff to back it up, you'll do better. And I've advised someone in this recently, and they didn't get the job.
Those are the risks, though, right?
It's a thick-skinned game where you're going to lose some and you're going to win some. If you're not hurting, try and win.
Yeah.
If you're hurting and it's junky stuff that no one wants to see, but it's going to pay you, and you got the time, go do the work. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Right next to shooting for these high-paying jobs, in between, I was shooting for like $2,500 day rate, shooting a thing in my local town of a trucking company that had this distribution center with a couple little hotel rooms in it that the truckers would stay at when they come up there and sleep and then drive back overnight. Just embarrassingly bad architecture and design and everything else. But yeah. I looked at it and I was like, I don't want to shoot this, but I'll shoot it for that much if that's worth it to you, And it was, and it took me about 4 hours, and it's not on my website. They're happy. I paid some bills.
Yeah.
It's a game that it's just a give and take. You'll sense the bigger money coming at you. Rise to the occasion. Don't establish yourself as the low-cost option with good clients. You don't want to be that person. If a low client is coming to you as a high option, that's a good position to be in, that these might be easier jobs that your natural ability with very little effort can improve their product. And that's a good relationship, even though it might not be stuff that you put on your website. It's great for them. It's great for your pocketbook. Leave it there. That's okay.
Yeah.
And if you have the time, But if your time is more effective seeking out more of those high-paying jobs, then don't waste your time. It's such a odd guessing game that takes so much intuitive kind of stuff to it.
And I think you get a better sense of it, the further along you are. I know that I have.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely probably priced myself out of a few jobs recently, but I didn't have an issue with that at all.
Yeah.
Because I thought, you know what, I know what my time is worth. I know what this project is, what's involved in this project. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to do it for less.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of the risk you have to take. But I remember first starting out and just being like, I'll take anything. Yeah. I'll shoot that for the. Oh.
And that's pretty much the correct mindset when you're first starting. It's like when you're falling, anything is a foothold, you know. And if you're looking to climb, grab onto something. And as you get further from the ground, there's a little more risk. But when you're at the bottom, there's no risk.
Yeah.
Start climbing.
But there is something to be said to. It feels good to say no, especially when you're creating a boundary for yourself and a value for what you think you're worth.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful. It's hard to do at first.
It's scary.
But it gets easier, I think.
It does. It does. As you plan appropriately and have the appropriate planning, saving, safety net, all that, and my wife has very much helped me do that we don't operate with any debt anymore at all. So there are no monthly payments for anything. So, I don't even have a credit card, which is annoying when you want to rent a car. But being in that position is just one more bit of freedom for your mind and your emotions. It's less financial momentum that you can just easily tap into. But if you're tapping into financial momentum that's not your own, they're going to come calling. And that thing that they call for is your emotional piece when you should maybe be thinking about creativity and the quality of your work. You're going to be more likely to hurry along in that job to finish it, to get the money and move on, or,
Yeah.
So there's always those push and pull things there that'll be odd.
Yeah.
So.
See, you're doing this mentorship thing great.
I think I can.
You can.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing long term. I've been dealing with money coming and going for a while in this sense, so that I can speak on that.
Yeah. It's good because it's one of those things that I think honestly it's the most difficult part of the work is just pricing yourself, being fair, and attracting clients but not underselling.
Yeah,
that's a big key.
Yeah. Well, what do you, if you're comfortable saying, what do you find the going rate for talented architectural photographers in not your rates being highly talented or no talent, not an analogy of you, but is there a sense of what the market bears in Los Angeles at this time?
Well, I will say in Orange County, in my particular area, so my friend that's in the firm that is helping me, I recently went along a walk along with them and did some shots of a house that they were finishing up. But we were talking, the builder was there, and he basically gave me some insight and said, typically with like a high-end home, now we're talking home, not, industrial or anything like that. It was somewhere in the ballpark of 5. And that was a collaboration of basically the architects, the interior designers, and the builders all get the photos in the end. That's really the only gauge I have of, okay, if going to move forward with this, that's kind of a baseline for me to start at. But, I've also heard some photographers, real high-end photographers in my area making well above 10 for a house. So
that's on par with what I've experienced. Some of the larger firms will work things out where they'll pay you, pretty much double that, but they get to resell the images, which, take it or leave it. It's double the pay and you're done. Or, are you missing out on selling all those other images? How much time do you have to go out and resell those images?
Yes.
How much will you be likely to take the time to do that rather than go play? Those are all things you have to weigh if you have a staff capable of reselling those images. I've had clients tell me that they've offered that kind of relationship to other photographers that charge far less, but even in making that much more money, they have people on their staff that want to go and get those images and resell them, and they pass on that money, which tells me that maybe there's a business model of hiring a person that takes all this stuff that you shoot that then says, all right, who's the paint supplier, the window supplier, the door supplier, the faucets, and we're going to resell. I just haven't ventured into that market to test it out as much. I've always known it's there. I've just been too busy to get into that. And when a client came along and said, hey, we'll pay you this, but we get to resell them, I did the math quick in my head and was like, done, let's do that. It's such an easy thing. We'll have a shoot somewhere I got to fly to, and it's just a set fee. And if I spend more money, I make less money. If I spend less money, I make more money, and it's done, and it's simple. I love it.
I think there's something to be said. That seems like more my style, which is just to do the job and be done.
Yeah, do the job, do it well.
Do it well. Yeah, absolutely.
I've enjoyed that working arrangement. It's been lucrative enough for me to not care and to not feel like I'm missing out on anything, and it served me well. So I would recommend that, and I've shared it with other clients. And you have to have a pretty big client. They have to have a staff capable of doing that on the other end of it. So it's a unique way of doing it. But that what you quoted there as far as pricing seems generally the range of that. And I find myself, like I was saying, occasionally on the low end of that for some agencies, or and then out of the ballpark on that on some. But those out of the ballpark ones are like once a year, once every other year, 3 times a year sometimes, and then all the rest fall in this anywhere from 20 to 2, roughly, depending on the amount of days and the amount of people involved. So it's all in the ballpark.
But I think once you get a frame of reference, it's kind of easy to build upon that and kind of get an idea of, okay, all right, this is what I'm kind of looking at, do a little more research, figure out how all of that breaks down, and but it's this is what I signed up for, This is all part of the learning process. It's frustrating at times, but I've learned to appreciate the value that comes with it, Yeah.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up on money.
Yeah, it's always good to end on money.
Let's end this whole thing with money. But yeah, thank you so much for being willing to come up here. It's really nice I haven't done a podcast in probably about a month now. We always just have a backlog. Yeah. But I find that it's one of those things, it's kind of like the longer I go without doing one, it's like kind of shaking up a soda bottle, and then we open it's like, yeah, I've got all these things I've been thinking about, and so
but that's great. Fun. There's not restrictions. You can just have a conversation and see where it goes. So I appreciate it.
And for photo nerds out there, they're gonna be like, this is all great. Yeah. And other people,
everybody else be like, what are they talking about?
What are they going on?
They went from AI to what? Right.
That's fun. Yeah, I think you probably have to have a pretty open mind to be able to enjoy going down so many odd avenues, but that's what I like.
That's what I like too.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, Nick Davies.
Yes.
I'm getting that right. Thank you so much for taking the time. Where can people find more about you and potentially hire you through?
Well, I think in my Instagram account would be the best, which is @NickDaviesDP. So going back to my roots as a director of photography.
I like it. Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, and look for Nick Davies DP on Instagram, and he'll have a website up as soon as he's not in such high demand.
I actually do have a still photography site, nickdaviesphotography.com.
Okay. There's
very
more
simple.
to the story.
Yeah. It's the video that I'm lacking on. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Well, again, thank you so much. I had a great time.
Likewise. Thanks, man.